You go by Mike.
I appreciate it. So.
Well, welcome everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. This is our April 9th City Council study session. And are we having Rob first, or are we bringing our guest in first?
I think there was an agenda change.
Are we ready to read?
Can I do the roll call?
Yeah, let's do roll call. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey. Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa.
He's here.
Okay. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Here.
And Councilmember Wales.
Here.
Okay. Well, again, welcome. We have Ann McFarland here with us today. Just a little bit of history here. She's a guest that has majored in Russian and Ancient Greek at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She received a Marshall Scholarship awarded by the British government and earned a second degree at Cambridge University in England. She then joined the U.S. Foreign Service, serving as a diplomat in Pakistan and on the Soviet desk of the U.S. State Department. After marrying fellow Foreign Service officer Lou McFarland, Ann became a stay-at-home mom in the Congo, Tanzania, and Nepal. On returning to Seattle, Ann became a Russian translator and was elected president of the American Translators Association. Since developing Jurassic Parliament in 2000, she trains elected officials, staff, and nonprofit board members across the nation. Ann is a professional registered parliamentarian with Andrew Estep. She is the author of Mastering Council Meetings. And with that,
I think we're up first.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor Baggett, there was the switch in the agenda to where
I didn't see the switch.
director contract discussion is going to go first because it's a shorter.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's switch roles here and put it back in Rob's.
Sure, sorry for the confusion. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Barber.
Yep, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Aaron Barber, and I'm the Compensation and Employee Relations Manager in the Human Resources Department. And I'm bringing forward the employment agreement for Department Director contracts. And the main purpose of the employment agreements is for recruitment and retention for department directors. It also offers us security for the department heads. So we are bringing that forward for your consideration and approval. We have done some analysis and looked out in the marketplace, and we have found that specifically Kent, Bothell, and Kirkland provide department director contracts. We also have found that Federal Way, Olympia, Tukwila, Puyallup, Linwood have some level of separation agreements or contracts for city managers and all that. So we think that this allows us to be competitive in the marketplace. It allows us to recruit and retain and keep our department heads, and it allows us to have the most competitive advantage for that. And I think that the form of government that we have with the strong mayor versus the city manager, strong mayor that we have a new mayor potentially every 4 years, and this gives some level of security for department heads where when you have a city manager form of government, then generally the city managers would be on contract, and so we believe this is an equivalent to this. There's also some provisions in the department department director contracts that mirror agreements that we have with collective bargaining agreements, and so we feel like if it's good for our unionized employees, that it should be for the benefit of our department heads as well. So with that, we're here to answer any questions and get your feedback on that.
I just,
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I have a question on the right to terminate employment. Could you explain at will? Because and then I underlined a little statement that you have under there, be terminated at any time by the city or without cause.
Sure.
Explain to me at will, and then I'll.
Sure. So generally, all of our employees are technically at-will employees, and so at the discretion of the mayor to determine their employment. They don't necessarily have contracts. Obviously, the union employees have collective bargaining agreements, and so there's different processes that we have to provide for that. But for our unaffiliated employees, they are at will, and you don't necessarily have to have cause in order to separate employment with those employees. Obviously, we don't want to violate any of our current federal, state laws, and so we wouldn't have any discriminating practices and all that kind of stuff. But and we generally want to fire for a cause. But
Okay, and so doesn't that, to me, that seem like, does the other cities have that clause in their statement as well? Because to me, it just seems like that's showing that we're not a friendly place, that we're just gonna fire you if we find a cause to fire you.
yeah, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to specifically say that we are not under contract with our employees, and so there generally will be progressive discipline. However, with department directors, that they are at-will employees, and I don't think that the intent isn't for us to go without having just cause. Yes, sir.
And just to add to that, Councilmember Trout Manuel, with director level positions, sometimes when you have a new mayor coming into office, they may have their own staff they may want to bring in or make some changes. So this affords some directors some certainty that if they are let go with a new mayoral change, that they have some conclusion as to what their employment, or some
Councilmember
conclusion
Wills.
to their employment.
This is pretty consistent with what all the major school districts do too, with the upper level
Okay.
executive or semi-executive positions, so that they can be, really build kind of a cohesive team. But that doesn't mean that they can violate things like, due process or do minority, all the other things. So it's just not anybody can go. They have to be reasonable in the application. But it's consistent with all upper level management.
Okay, this is first, oops. Okay, this was the first time I've ever read something like that, and so it just caught me like, wow, we sound like we're not that friendly with this person. Okay, thank you for clearing all that up.
And that does follow along with our city policies as well. So we do have that language in our city policies. We have a general policy statement like that.
Any other questions? Councilmember Holman.
Thank you. One of our department directors, and it may apply to others, comes with a certain set of Washington state laws. For instance, your chief of police cannot be fired at will, but has to be fired for cause. And that's just an RCW. And I saw you had a statement in there not to preclude state and federal laws.
Sure.
It's not a blanket authority.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Pelosi.
So, was this created from something else out in the US of A?
Yeah, we asked for sample documents from our neighboring jurisdictions, and specifically Kirkland Bothell can't have those. I think this is a collection of all of the different contracts.
Did we make any changes to the agreements that we received?
Oh, yes, I'm sure that we did.
to fit our cities?
Yep.
I don't know if it's prudent to ask this question at this time, but what's the real reason behind doing this at this time?
Well, part of it is we had a recent election, but we also have some retirements coming up. And this will help us in the recruitment for the director level positions. As you know, I think our
Thank you.
city attorney as well as our chief.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I do
Sorry,
have.
go ahead.
So what's the process of revising this in the future?
Suggestion
Council would make a suggestion, or staff would make a suggestion? How would HR handle this?
we would take direction from the mayor.
Wales?
Well, I can understand if there was a change in a mayoral leadership, but I can't understand this application in relationship to retirements. So explain to me
Sure.
the retirement piece.
It's more for recruitment. Since we have retirements coming up, we're going to have openings and vacancies. So in order to recruit some certain level directors, like to have the certainty or a guarantee, so to speak. So it's a marketing tool.
Okay.
It's our ability, another tool in our tool chest.
Okay, it's clarity, thank you. Sorry, I interrupted.
Any other questions? Thank you both.
Thanks, Aaron. Good job.
You've all heard me explain Ann McFarland's credentials. I would like to welcome you to the group.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I've worked with your junior council before at Councilmember Pelosa's request, but not with you all as a whole, and it's a privilege, of course, to be here. So many of you have heard my tale, but I will tell it again, of how I was elected president of the American Translators Association, and I thought, oh, I'd better learn Robert's Rules of Order, and got myself a Robert and fell away in horror and amazement. What a terrible book it is. But my conclusion was that Robert is like the 80-20 rule. You know that one. 20% of the people drink 80% of the beer, and 20% of your constituents give you 80% of your problems. There's a core to Robert's Rules that we really need, and that is important for good and fair and democratic meetings. And so that's what I strive to offer, and that's what my business partner and I, Andrew Estep, did in our book, which you have, Mastering Council Meetings. So I'd like to invite you each to take your book and write your name in it so we know whose is whose. And we wrote it with lots of white space. We intended it to be a practical tool, so please feel free to stick Post-its in it and highlight things and mark it up. It's a practical thing that we hope will be useful to you. So as you all know, I liked very much to have interactive sessions, but we're going to have about 25 minutes of a kind of an argument or a presentation first, and then we'll get into the interactivity. So let me get my clicker. Here we go. I want to say before proceeding that I'm not an attorney, that this is based on the principles and practice of parliamentary procedure. Nothing in this presentation constitutes legal advice. And if your attorney tells you something different from what I tell you, listen to your attorney. He's the authority that you need to listen to. So this is what we're going to cover. We'll do a little bit on the historical background, then we'll talk about the authority of the council and the members. We'll talk about meeting debate and keeping order, inappropriate remarks, the authority of the chair, and the principles of democratic governance. So you have a handout, and in order to make it as useful as possible, we've given you the PowerPoint with space for taking notes. Now, if you are not a note taker, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do that to get the benefit. But as you see on page 3, we also have some reflection questions. So before we get into these, I have a totally radical request. I would like to invite all of you, if you're willing, to turn off your cell phones and put them away, because the research shows that even glancing at a cell phone raises our stress level. Now, obviously, if you're an MD on call, that's not the case, but if you're willing to put it away and I can have all of your attention, I will really appreciate it, because I'm a greedy person.
It's right in here.
I'm a greedy person. I want all of your
You
attention.
want them turned off completely or
If
just
you're
put on
willing,
vibrate?
if you're willing, I'd like you to turn it off, just for the radicalness of it. So,
And,
yes,
excuse me,
yes,
look at this.
your case, it's empty.
No cell phone.
I don't know if a case stimulates the adrenal cortisols, but there we are. So I'd like to start, I hope to make this as beneficial and useful to you as I can. I'd like to start with the first reflection question. And it's a question just for you. Nothing, I'm not going to ask you to share it, but I'd like you to write down the completion to this sentence. On our council, I wish that. On our council, I wish that. So whatever your wishes are for the Auburn City Council. And you have it as a sheet in the front of the handout as well as the PowerPoint. So if you like a little more room, it's on page 3. On page 3 of the handout. If you go back a little bit, Mayor Baggett, just keep going. If I may. There it is.
Oh, this one right here.
Just to give you a little more continuity. So there we go. So that's the first reflection question. And the second, which I'd also like you to fill out now, again, just for yourself. I ran for elected office in the city of Auburn because. The reason why you chose to make that considerable sacrifice of energy, time, and commitment and run for elected office in the city of Auburn. So now, having addressed that question, we're going to have a complete change of subject and talk about homicide. In prehistoric communities, the archaeological evidence seems to show that 35% of the males died by violence. I was very surprised when I found this out because I think we kind of have a tendency to romanticize the past and imagine primitive peoples being more peaceful than we are, but the figure is very, very high. And even today, in the Amazon rainforest, 25% of males die by violence. Certain tribes have very primitive ways of settling their differences, and of course the reason that experts talk about homicide is because you can measure it. If you're trying to measure how violent a community is, homicide gives you a number, which you don't have other ways of measuring. We also have had our own instances. In World War II, the Soviet Union lost 14% of its males in combat. It was an extraordinary thing that so many of the men of that country and community perished in the struggle. So I'm going to ask you a question. And this one, if you're willing to share, I will ask your answer. And the question is, in New York City today, what is your guess as to what the homicide rate is? And I want you to write it down. And you don't have to be accurate. I'm not striving for accuracy because probably you might not have thought about this question.
Just in the male or total?
No, just generally, yeah. So make a guess. My late husband was very good at estimating amounts, and he was quite a good contrast for me because once when we were living in Dar es Salaam, instead of ordering 96 bottles of beer, I ordered 96 cases. So
Good on you,
I was
Ann.
not very good at that kind of estimate. And he was very kind. He said, don't tell me how much it is, just tell me if we can absorb it. And I said, well, get some to the Marines, and we'll have lots of parties. And
I thought maybe you were the 20%.
Right. So, does anyone want to make a guess? Just offer a guess?
15%.
Okay, anybody else?
0.1%.
Anybody else?
I'll go 1/10%.
Okay? No?
Same
Just
thing,
ordered.
yeah.
I'd say it's
He said
6.5.
Yeah, so 10th is less.
0.0. I had 5%.
Okay, good. Well, it's, you know, just
It's
for
less
our,
than-
just to stretch our brains, just the little gray cells, as Hercule Poirot says. The actual rate is 4 1,000ths. 4 1,000ths. It's astounding. It's an astounding change.
What's on your mind?
And far, far less than I imagined when I started looking into this. So the question that I want to present to you is, how did we get there? How do we go from 35% to 25% to 14% to 4 1,000ths of 1%? 4 people per 100,000. And it's going to be kind of a very quick sketch, but I just want to say that it's been a long, slow story, and the theory is that in the beginning it was the king who was the source of all earthly power and authority. And the king receives his power from God. So we had the great chain of being. We had God, and then we had the king, and then we had everybody else. And kings didn't like it when their knights were killing each other, because that was using up good soldiers, good stock that they could use in wars with others. And it was also degrading their tax base. They weren't out farming, they were out raiding each other's castles. So they started establishing the king's peace. And the king's peace was that the king would be able to have loyal and faithful soldiers within his dominions. And the king had a number of symbols of authority, and one of them was the crown, as we can imagine. One was the mace, which is actually the ancestor of our gavel. When you're using that gavel, you're using an ancient symbol of authority. And one, surprisingly, was the dais. That dais was actually a symbol of authority, and there's an interesting anecdote. When Mary, Queen of Scots, was being held prisoner by her cousin, Queen Elizabeth, who kept her in various castles in the north, she had a dais. She would sit there and eat her dinner all by herself on a dais in a regal chair with a little table and with a golden canopy overhead. And when Queen Elizabeth decided that maybe it was time to get rid of this difficult cousin of hers who was threatening her throne, she took away the dais. And the queen was very angry. She said, "This is the symbol of my prerogative. So I want you to know that when you take your places on that dais, it is something with ancient history. It's a very great symbol of authority." So in 1215, we have that famous moment when King John said, "The law is in my mouth." That was the king. The law is in my mouth. But the nobles made him sign the Magna Carta. He wasn't able to get away with it. He backtracked immediately, of course, but it was the kind of beginning of the long struggle. And at that time, Parliament was the king's posse. Parliament was the nobles who were used to raise money for the king, and the nobles were subject to the king's will. The concept was the king in Parliament. Well, for instance, in 1595, Peter Wentworth, who was a member of Parliament, criticized Queen Elizabeth. She popped him in the tower. She wasn't going to put up with that. Once he got out, he was back again, and he criticized Queen Elizabeth, and his colleagues put him in the tower. His fellow parliamentarians put him in the tower because they didn't want to run any risks of having the queen mad at them. So this was not our concept of what a parliament is. There was no such thing as point of personal privilege. When we say that, point of personal privilege, it's a very deep and sacred thing, because it means that in our legislative function, we can't be arrested because of what we say, because the king doesn't like what we said. At that time, if the monarch didn't like what you said, off you went. You were arrested or executed. So there was a long struggle, which I'm going to spare you all, but a culminating moment was in 1642 when King Charles I tried to arrest 5 parliamentarians. He didn't like what they were doing, and his wife said to him, "If you don't go down there and get them, I'll pull your ears and never speak to you more." So he went off with his troops to the parliament, and somebody had tipped them and they had gone. And so he said, "I see the birds are flown." It was the last time that a British monarch entered the House of Commons. Since that time, the monarch has never gone into the House. That's the privilege that the House said. So there were a lot of back and forth. As I say, it's fascinating, but I'm going to spare you tonight. But in 1776, we abandoned the entire idea that authority flows from God to the king. So under our idea, who does authority come from?
The people.
It comes from we the people. And that was just a very radical and amazing thing. And so we had what the British thought of as the colonial rebellion, which became the American Revolution. We had the Treaty of Paris and independence, and then we had our U.S. Constitution. So It was really a defining moment, I believe, in the history of the world. So that leads me, I want to talk about your authority, the authority of the council and the members. So your authority comes from the U.S. Constitution, through the Washington State Constitution, and through Washington State laws and regulations. That's what your authority comes from, thank goodness, not from a king or a monarch. And so here is a reflection question for you. And again, on this one, I will ask you for an answer if you like. Who do you think wrote the first manual of parliamentary procedure? Just make a guess. Just make a guess and write it down. Who do you think wrote the first manual of parliamentary procedure? Doesn't matter if it's wrong. You get credit for trying.
Ann McFarland?
She won't qualify, believe me. Just guess. All right, anybody want to guess? Claude.
Benjamin Franklin.
Great guess. Anybody else?
John Adams.
Yeah?
Thomas Jefferson.
You get, that's the prize.
what I
Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, and I want to tell you that it was not the mayor of Enumclaw who wrote the first manual, but I was just last week in Enumclaw, and their city hall is modeled on Monticello. It was such a privilege to be there, such an extraordinary thing. So I'm just going to pass this around. This was the very first manual of parliamentary procedure that we have. So Thomas Jefferson had a wonderful quote: "An association of people who will not quarrel with another is a thing that has never yet existed, from the smallest town meeting or vestry to the greatest assembly of nations." So we think of our founding fathers and how great they were, but they had their quarrels, they had their fights, they had their difficulties as well. And the whole idea of writing the manual was to try to help everybody come together. So you are, as you know, I'm telling this preaching to the choir, but you know you're a code city with a mayor-council type of government. The mayor is the chief administrative officer. The council is the legislative body. So each party, mayor and council, has duties as assigned by law, regulation, and custom. The mayor administration is the prerogative of the mayor. The council may not interfere. And prerogative is a right or privilege exclusive to a particular individual or class. So that's the definition of prerogative. And legislation is the prerogative of the council. The mayor may not interfere. So there's one little point that follows from this that I just wanted to mention, and because I found it comes up over and over again in cities that I deal with, which is that members of the council must speak with respect about the staff. Council members must not criticize the staff in public, because that's a violation of the prerogative of the administration. If you have concerns, speak to the mayor about it privately. And your council procedures, section 15, are excellent on this. In fact, I'm going to steal it for an article I'm writing about staff relations. I think they really cover it very, very well. So the mayor and the staff form one kind of structure called an accountability hierarchy, and the council, you all, you 7, form another called a voluntary association. So I want to distinguish between these two different types. In an accountability hierarchy, you have a boss at the head of the organization who's in charge. And that person hires people, tells them how to do their job, and if they do it badly, fires them. So it's a very, very common structure. Corporations are built like that. The military is built like that. Every hospital has a superintendent. Every school has a principal. And one feature of it is that it has status or rank. And people who are near the top are higher in status than the people who are down below. And that's not in and of itself a bad thing. To me, that's necessary for accountability. You hope that the people with high status use it intelligently and listen to the people of lower status, which they have a tendency not to do. But if we all, for instance, if all of us who are here in this room had the job of building an addition to the Auburn City Hall, we would never succeed if we were all of the same status. We need rank, we need status for accountability. Now to this, I want to contrast a voluntary association. In a voluntary association, a group of people come together to achieve a common purpose. They set up some guidelines for themselves, and they select a leader. The leader is a peer. The leader is an equal on the same status, the same standing as the other members. So it's very, very different. And one of the biggest issues that we have in this country, to my mind, is that the model of the leader as the captain of industry is so well established that we tend to feel, once we're elected chair of our Rotary Club board or of our choir director, in my case, that we're the boss. But we are not. We are not the boss. It's a very, very different role, and the leader has to do things in a very different way than a leader of a voluntary association. So there are 3 principles that follow from that. First, each member of the association has an equal right to speak and to try to persuade others to accept her view. Second, during meetings, the chair controls the process so the group can make the decisions. The chair, in this case our deputy mayor, or at full council meetings the mayor, controls the process in the service of the group so the group can make the decisions. And during meetings, the chair is the servant of the group and the group is the final authority. And we're going to talk about how that plays out in practice. So here's a little reflection question for you. I told one person about this and he said, I don't want to be a servant, that means I'm weak. I told another person about this and he said, what do you mean? I always believe lead, follow, or get out of the way. Can you tell he's had a military background? So just for a moment, if you would, on our reflection questions page, write your own thoughts. Again, this is just for you. What does the concept, how does that servant leadership concept resonate with me? What sense does it make to you or not? So now I'm going to ask you a question which is pretty obvious, but I think it's important to cover. What is each person's individual authority? When you as a council member leave these chambers and walk out onto the street, how much authority do you have? Yes. Absolutely none. You have no authority whatsoever. Zero. Zip. Nada. And you know, we are so individualistic in our society that that seems almost anti-American, but it's actually deeply and profoundly American. And here is a wonderful formula of it in my mind. All members of a governing body share in a joint and collective authority which exists and can be exercised only when the group is in session. So that is why your meetings are so precious. You know, that's a very short interval of time, and that's the time during which you exercise your authority. And that's why, for instance, nonprofit boards in the state of Washington may not make decisions by email. You can't send out an email to your choir and say, shall we hire this assistant, and get a 5-4 answer back and say that's a vote. That is not allowed. That is not a vote. And we have information on our blog about this if any of you are in nonprofit boards where that's an issue. So what is your individual power? Again, when people get elected to public office, they are often surprised at how little power they have. An individual council member may not have a staff member fired, direct staff, oversee employee work product, or interfere in administration. Now, I'm sure you all know this, but I just want to emphasize it so that we're clear about our terms, that you are the policy maker, but you are not the mover and the shaker, and that's the law. Now, here's another great quote from Benjamin Franklin. For when you assemble a number of people to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with them all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. I think it's a wonderful thing that he saw that so early. So I want to say to you that the clash of opinions is vital. The fact that you all, 7 members of this council and the mayor, have different opinions is a strength. It's a good thing. We need those differing opinions in order to tease out the best course forward for the city of Auburn. But we tend to identify with our own position, and when we're defeated, we sometimes take it personally. And that's a mistake. That's a mistake, because at the end of the day, the body must unite behind its decision. It's a basic democratic principle that the decision of the majority voting at a meeting is the decision of the body as a whole, and the minority must make it their decision as well. Now, it's a terrible system. If you would just hire me to direct everything on your council, it'd be much better. But I love Winston Churchill's quote, "Democracy is the worst system of government in all the world, with the exception of those others that have been tried from time to time." I mean, it's a terrible system, but in other ways, it's a wonderful system. So I love this quote from Cornell Clayton: "The willingness to engage in honest debate and lose on issues you care deeply about reaffirms your commitment to common citizenship." To me, that's just the essence of what you all are doing and what our democratic process is. Yes?
I'd like to point out and add, go Cougs.
Hooray, go Cougs, absolutely. Cornell Clayton's a great guy. And there's an even briefer and I think more powerful formula of this from Elias Canetti, the Nobel Prize winner. "The ballot box is sacred because the alternative is blood." And when you are engaged in your work, to me, it is sacred. It is something that is very, very important for our society. So that's my, and if you agree with this, if you think that this view, if you think that this view of things makes sense, I'd like to offer you my little cheat sheet for the chair. Full disclosure, it's also my business card, so I don't want to pretend that I'm giving you something in a different way. But it's got a little summary of these key principles. This was the card that I showed that county council chairman who said, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." He wasn't going to have anything to do with it, at least in theory anyway. So that's a resource for you. So now we get to the interesting part. We get to talk about meeting debate. And as we've done before, I'm sure you all have, some of you have been in Jurassic Parliament events. I'm going to pass out some remarks. And I'm going to ask us to go through a short little role play where I will call a number and you will read the remark that corresponds to that number. So I'm just going to pass them out in a moment. And I have a couple of things I want to mention to you. One is, if your remarks have special instructions, don't read them aloud. Those are just for you to be able to know how to engage in your role. And if you have an interactor, this is a great time to let it out. If you don't, it doesn't matter. You just have to read what's there. So let me get these ready for you.
Not ready for prime time.
So these first two ones, they actually have two roles. So you'll have two remarks to read, and then after you've read them, then you can go to that one and change. So take a look and see what you've got. Same thing for you. We'll start off as the finance officer, and then after that report, you go to being the chef.
Wow, that's quite a combination.
Exactly. Hopefully you're not cooking the books.
Trying to deal with different things here.
Just don't start smoking it.
Thank you, Ann.
So I'm going to blank out the screen if I can while we do this. So take a look, and some of you have more than one remark, and in particular, you two, the elderly and the environmentalist, you have some that go right back and forth, so don't be shy about that. You be prepared to engage in the debate if need be. All right. So any questions? All ready for this? We're gonna do this for two portions: meeting debate and then keeping order. All right. So this meeting of the Dinopolis City Council is called to order, and I'll ask the administrator to give us the report.
Your administrator is happy to report that everything is just great in the city of
Dinopolis.
I can't say it. Our citizens, residents, employees, and colleagues in the League of Northwest Dino City all loves us. Public opinion poll shows that the city of Dinopolis has the highest rating for resident satisfaction in the entire league. Everything is peachy, amazing, fabulous, and totally awesome with the city of Dinopolis.
Thank you so much, Madam Administrator. That's great to hear. Now let's hear the finance officer's report.
I'm happy to state
that the city of Dinopolis has done very well this year, with total income of $200 million and total expenditures of only $190 million. We now have a $10 million surplus. Many thanks to all who have made this possible.
Thank you so much. The mayor echoes your sentiments. That's really wonderful news. The next item of business is we're going to hear from the administrator on the proposal to increase parking fees.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is continued pressure on our parking space in the downtown area of the city of Dinopolis. The staff has reviewed the matter carefully. As you know, our current rate is $2 per hour. We recommend that the new fee be set at $20 per hour.
Thank you. Does anyone care to make that motion?
I move that parking fees be set at $20 per hour.
Number 5.
I'll second it.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we increase parking fees from $2 to $20 per hour. We'll now have discussion. Do you care to speak to your motion, Madam Environmentalist?
Yes, well, I'm a believer in public transportation myself. I think that this increase will lessen congestion and also force more people to take buses or walk. It's a good idea for the environment and for our city.
Thank you. Further discussion? Elderly member?
I think this is a terrible idea. We've just learned that we have a $10 million surplus. Why would we increase parking fees and burden our residents that way?
Do you know that the parking fees in most cities of the league are $15 per hour? We are so far below the market that it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, that's not a reason to go crazy and lay this burden on our residents. Many elderly dinosaurs are really feeling the pinch. The improvement in the economic situation hasn't touched them.
You know, there's no point being an old softy and begging for sympathy for the down and out. If they had an ounce of gumption, they would have saved up for their old age.
What a hard-hearted comment. Someday you might be old and wrinkled and poor yourself. You have no compassion.
All I have to say to you about that is nonsense, applesauce, and balderdash.
13.
Point of order.
State your point.
These members are monopolizing this discussion. Under Robert's rules, no one can speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once.
The point is well taken. So, an exchange like that should never happen in your meetings, and I'm sure that it never does, but just in case, let's look at the principle of equality. This is a fundamental principle of Robert's rules. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. And the way it plays out is that discussion in council and committee meetings is not a conversation. It is debate, and it has its own rules. And there is a rule, which I think is the most neglected rule in all of Robert. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. In fact, it's so important, we're going to have it in red. Could I hear it, please? No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. Yes.
Well, while those two are having their dialogue, no one else raised their hand to be recognized to speak.
Yes.
So they should have been able to, or should the person have interrupted or stopped it and said, okay, they've each had their 2 questions. Would anyone else like to say anything?
Yes, the chair should have stopped it.
Okay.
I just wanted to have it for the demonstration purposes.
Okay.
But
Well,
you're
I want to know
absolutely
how to
right.
problem solve it. I
Yes.
just don't want to know how all the rules. Okay.
Yes, and we're going to get
great.
into that in
Okay.
great detail.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Yes.
We're going to get into suspension of the rules too, I suppose,
I
right?
had not planned to address that, but let's go through the content, and then we'll have time for Q&A as well, so we can tackle that.
So you don't want questions right now? You want to
Take them, sure.
Okay,
Okay.
Yolanda has a question.
On that same question, so did you say us council members can be the one to step in? Say,
Absolutely,
Okay,
and we're going to
so-
show you how.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And these are great, important questions, so thank you. And because the whole system only works if everybody knows it, if everybody understands it. That's why I'm here, is to try to give you tools so that you have an equal footing for all the members. So this is a critical rule, and applying this rule will transform your meetings, and it's a must if you want to maximize your effectiveness. The Washington State Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs told me that their board meetings were cut in half after they applied this one rule, just this one rule. But for some reason, we don't do it. And I think the reason is that councils tend to discuss their affairs in conversational mode. And in conversations, dominant people tend to dominate and agreeable people tend to let them. So you must have a structure to make sure that everyone has an equal chance to speak. Yes?
So the third bullet, agreeable people tend to let them. So after 2 questions, a chair should stop and say, is there anyone else, even though you haven't raised your hand, is there anyone else who'd like to say anything before we go on?
I think that would be good.
I don't want to know if it's good or not, I want to know what the rules say. Do you have to stop? If no one's hands are up and verbally say, does anyone else want to say anything before we go on?
No, you do not have to.
But it would be best practice
It's
to
a
ask.
good practice to ask.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Because the burden is on the members. In fact, the Robertian phrase, and you know, I'm trying to interpret Robert's, everyday people can use it. The Robertian phrase is that you can't speak while another member is seeking recognition. So Robert is talking specifically about raising your hand, but we have found that introverted and quiet people often don't seek recognition, and so we prefer the phrase wishes to speak, and then that does leave it a bit gray, you're absolutely right, as to what the duty is of the chair in that regard. And again, the duty will vary depending on how knowledgeable people are about Robert's rules. Yes?
Now, Nancy does a really nice job of when we're doing this, of very consciously looking around the room so that you
Great.
know she's looking to see if there's
If
somebody
someone's
else
seeking
wants to say
recognition.
that. And sometimes there's a slight pause, but she does. Is that sufficient by looking at each person like that? Or do you think that we should say, is there anyone else that wants to comment under best practices? So
I
it's
think asking is good.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
asking is good.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
So, but if the chair is not paying attention, in this instance, I was allowing that to happen, another member can make a point of order. So a member breaks one of the rules, a member makes a point of order. So this is where we get to have a little bit of our dinosaur action. So we had that motion, we had the motion that we were going to raise the parking fees, and discussion was going on, and someone made a point of order. So in our system, point of order is like a flying dinosaur. It's a pterodactyl that flies over the current motion, and it has to deal with it right away. You have to take care of it right away. So you bat it out of the sky. The chair issues a ruling on the point of order. And that is one very fundamental and important motion for all of you to know about. And so we're going to do a quick little exercise. Please pair up in twos and read through the scripts, which are coming up on the next page in your handout, of point of order. First, one of you will be the chair and the other will be the member. And then when you turn the page, you can change roles. So you two will be a pair, and you two will be a pair, you two will be one, and you will be one. You found them, the point of order scripts? Keep turning, keep going.
Point of order?
Keep going. There we go.
What page?
So unfortunately, the pagination is going to be
It's
after,
17.
yes, after 16. Yeah.
State your point.
Chair, I rise to point of order.
State your point.
My esteemed colleague has used the term cream-faced loon, is referring to the mayor of Fernville. According to Robert's rules, insults are not allowed in debate.
Chair, I raise a
The
point.
point is well taken. Members will refrain from using improper language. State your point. Member B, Chair, I rise to a point of order.
No,
Pat, do you think?
Okay.
Yeah. Cream-faced loon, according to the mayor.
The point is well taken.
Chair, I rise to a point of order.
State your point.
You announced the motion that I made and then called for the vote right away. We have to have discussion on this motion before we decide what to do about it. Sorry.
Point is well taken. Is the maker of the
Ready
motion
for the next one? Oh, state your point.
So member B,
Are you ready to vote on the motion?
Chair, I raise to a point of order.
State your point.
Sam
Chair, the point is well taken.
Stegosaurus has spoken 3 times already.
So member B has the floor. So it has to.
Point is well taken.
It has to be.
Who would like to speak
Member B,
next?
doesn't it?
Personal attacks on their colleagues or anyone else.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
We voted
So
to
they
approve
made a
the
motion.
amendment,
It has
but we
not been
haven't yet
seconded.
voted to approve the motion
That
itself.
maker of the motion can't speak to it until after it has had a second.
Which business is?
Chair, I raise a point of order.
Oh,
State your
okay,
point.
got it.
McCauley has
Good,
called
okay.
Bozo.
Members.
It is improper to
See?
use such
Are you
personal
seeing?
insults during our meeting.
State your point.
Okay,
Point is well taken, but you really are opposed.
state
No.
your point. Oh, wait a
Meetings
second.
will
I
refrain
had
from
another quick
making-
question. When I read
Yeah, I
your
did.
motion,
He did.
point
He
of
just
order,
called me a
it said you're supposed to
bozo.
stand and say.
Members will
point of
refrain
order.
from making personal attacks on themselves or anything else, or anyone else.
Okay,
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
I want to do
Have
this
declared the
right.
meeting
Might
adjourned.
not show the right
We'll
respect.
have business to
Point of
discuss.
order.
The chair of the meeting doesn't have the power to adjourn the meeting like
From
that.
somebody.
The
has-
point is
yeah.
well taken. Our meeting will continue. The next item of business is.
Very good.
See, we lie, I like.
You're really not. Just
I think it
kidding.
helps this, you know. Yeah.
I've been called worse.
Yeah, I have
That's
to.
okay.
I probably deserved it.
Okay.
Good point. Sam.
Well, I
Sam
hope I
Sagittarius
did,
has
but
spoken 3 times already, but
okay.
the other members are waiting to speak. Point is,
Well,
Sometimes I'm ill-behaved.
see? Oh, we got a whole other page.
Maybe we should
Well,
have been
why don't we just skip
thespians
ahead,
instead
'cause
of
you've got the
council members.
Oh, yeah, but we're having fun.
Well, that's good, that's good.
We're done.
That's the idea.
Okay, yes.
So, the question came up about standing. Robert has special rules for small boards, which are considered to be up to about 12, and so you don't need to stand when you're on a small board. City councils don't usually do that, and that's fine. So, we like some of the small board rules, but not all of them. So why don't you put a tab in your book on small board rules, which are on page 77. So put a Post-it, if you would, on page 77, small board rules, and highlight it in yellow.
Where's my thing?
For instance, one of the interesting things about small board rules is that a second is not required, but every city council that I know requires a second and has it in their rules, and that's higher than Robert. So if that's your rules, that's what you're gonna be following. So page 77 is the small board rules, and page 59 is point of order.
I'm using them all
Oh,
up with all
okay.
my questions, I'm saving them.
That's great, we got lots more.
Okay.
You're well supplied with Post-its.
Did you say 57 or 50? Oh,
5 minutes.
Small board rules is 77, and point of order is 59. Right back with you. Where that green bag is anyway. We've got tons more Post-its, I'll find them in a minute. So, I would like you, one of the issues about all this is that learning the language of Robert's rules is like learning a foreign language. And, you know, we all feel self-conscious. It's odd to have these. So I'd like you to practice. I want you to get this so that it's very easy and comes naturally to you all. So here's a little jargon practice. If you're a member and you observe a violation, what do you say?
Point of order.
Point of order. So if you're the chair, what is your response?
state
State your point. State your point. Then the member says what the violation is. Then, if you agree, you say, the point is well taken. Could I hear that?
The point is well taken.
And if you disagree, you say, the point is not well taken. So I really recommend saying the whole sentence. People sometimes tend to abbreviate it. They say, point well taken. Don't do that. Say, the point is well taken, or the point is not well taken. Now, we're going to have lots more examples, so you'll get a chance to get this in your mouth. But
So you're not,
You
the,
didn't put that in here, though, the one, the point is not.
no, it'll come later.
Okay.
It'll come later.
okay, so all of us respond the point is not well taken, or just the deputy mayor or the chairperson
The
of that?
chair, the person who's leading. This is language for the chair.
Okay.
Now, we are going to cover what you do if you're a member and you disagree with the ruling.
Okay.
We will cover that. But as you know, we can't do it all at once, so we're
Yep.
trying to take our way through it. So let's just review this again. So what do you say if you're a member and you think a rule has been broken?
Point of order.
Nice and loud, can I hear it?
Point of order.
And then if you're the chair, what do you respond?
State
State
your
your
point.
point.
And if you're the chair, the member says it, and then if you agree, what do you say?
The point
Point
is
is
well
well
taken.
And if you disagree?
The
Point is not well taken.
Right, that's the language. So, let's continue here. So, let's go back to our meeting here where we're discussing the parking fees, and I'll hear from number 15. Whoever's got number 15.
This is likely to put a crimp on the vitality of our downtown. As a business owner, I'm really concerned about this. I speak against the motion.
Thank you. 16.
I see those arguments, but I think we have to be prudent. I guess I guess on balance, I'm in favor of the proposal.
17.
If we do this, the residents are likely to come and throw eggs at our house. Or even worse, I'm dead against it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. Now, please vote in favor for demonstration purposes. So the motion is that parking fees be set at $20 per hour. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the parking fees will be set at $20 per hour. Now, let's take a quick romp through a few slides about how to do this. How are we going to achieve our goal of having everyone have an equal opportunity to speak? Here are our points that we recommend. First, members seek recognition before speaking. Members seek recognition. Don't let people just blurt stuff out. Second, members speak to the chair and not to each other. Members speak to the chair and not to each other. The chair keeps track of who has spoken and who wishes to speak, and you can also empower the vice chair to keep track. It's good practice for them. Or you can use the round robin, which we describe in the book, which is where you go around the table and ask each person in turn what they think. But there are a few tricks to that, so you might want to study a little bit before implementing it. So let's quickly look at these. Recognition. You raise your hand and you wait to speak until the chair calls your name, nods at you, or gives you some other sign that you have permission to speak. And don't do this. Madam Chair, I'd like to say that. I worked with a bunch of very high-paid doctors, and they had a tendency to say it. I would like to say. They would raise their hand as they spoke. That doesn't work. It's back and forth. It's a kind of a sonar. Speaking to the chair, and you have this in your rules. You have this in your rules that you speak to the chair, not to another member. Everything goes back and forth between the chair and the members. And this depersonalizes issues and improves the clarity of discussion. And it means that members may not say you to each other. You should never have your members saying you to each other, and Council Rule 7.3 requires this. Now, the reason is what we call down the rabbit hole. If members speak to one another, often the discussion degenerates into a conversation between two members. Down the rabbit hole results in the rest of the group being left out, as we saw with our environmentalist and elderly member, and the principle of equality is violated. One person speaks at a time. When a member has the floor, they have the right to speak until they've completed their comments. Interrupting under Robert's rules is absolutely forbidden. Now, we do it in real life all the time, but it's not allowed at council meetings. Yes?
Okay, so until they have completed their comments.
Yes.
So you can start out and say, about the parking, I have 3 concerns.
Mhm.
And then you can go 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
And then you need to wait till everyone else responds before you bring up 4.
Mhm.
So it's in your best interest when you have comments to say 2 or 3, even though you may only have 2, because then you've saved room for the 3rd that might germinate in your head as you're saying 1 and 2.
Sure, you could say, I have a few comments.
Okay, a few comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to number them.
Okay, got them.
So members may not interrupt each other, and the chair may not interrupt members. I love this, that Robert specifically says the chair may not interrupt a member even if he knows more about the subject than the member himself. So that's just absolutely not allowed. Now, there is one exception, which is to make a point of order when it's essential. We do not encourage people to interrupt each other with a point of order, but I once saw a video of a council meeting for another city, which I will not name, in which after they took their votes, they had a custom that each member could speak, which I do not recommend. And one council member started off like this: you should not have voted against that ordinance because you are the first Jewish deputy mayor of our city, and you are a veteran, and you should have known better, and you are a woman, so you shouldn't have voted that way. I mean, I would have made a point of order. I would have stopped her because that was so pernicious, so dreadful. so useless, so corrupting, and so unfortunate for that city. So you can interrupt, but we don't recommend doing it lightly. Now, so these are our guidelines. No interrupting, no whispering, no sidebar conversations. You know, if you're recording your meeting, sidebar conversations don't get recorded. And so that could be a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. No texting. I'm sure you know that your texts during a meeting are official communications, and we don't want to be in the position of that unhappy Kirkland City Council member some years ago who was sending sext messages to his mistress in the audience, and they all came out as public records. So no checking cell phones. You know, the council deserves your full attention during the time that you are meeting. So here's a little language tip for you, and then I'll take the questions. Members will kindly refrain from sidebar conversations. Again, and I'm going to give you a list of all these tips. So members will kindly refrain from sidebar conversations. That's what the chair can say if people are whispering. Yes?
So referring to that, that goes to every single one of us members, right?
Mm-hmm.
For every single one of us.
You mean to follow those rules?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you
Yes.
for bringing that up.
And so Larry is talking about how we have that $10 million surplus.
Yes.
And Yolanda is texting. Do I wait until Larry's done talking about his $10 million and say point of order? Yolanda's texting again?
Do you have it in your rules that there's no texting?
No.
Well, you should. You should put it in your rules. This is a whole issue of electronic communications. I don't think you can find, I don't think Robert has advanced enough to have that as a rule. I'm giving best practice here. And also what the state of Washington says, which is that if you're texting during a meeting, you must have a means of preserving all of that. So your IT guy has got a huge job as well if that's going on.
Okay.
Yes?
So we have members in the audience that text some of our council members, or else they're on the internet viewing our meetings and they text some of our council members to ask a question. Is that allowed, or should that not be?
That should not be happening.
Okay.
That should not be happening. You all should turn that thing off and put it away for a whole bunch of reasons. There's the law, and then there's right practice. You know that the fact that we're allowed to do something doesn't mean that we should do it. You need to give your full attention to the matter of your council while you are meeting, and you do not need to be engaging with the audience. Now, we had a terrible example in the city of Burien where a council member who chose not to run again was tweeting to all of her fan base, misquoting what her fellow council members were saying. I mean, really terrible things can happen. And so thank God that that's not been happening with you all. But in general, I would recommend put it away. Put it away, give your full attention to the meeting, and deal with your constituents afterwards. All right, so what about time limits? This is where it gets interesting. Robert's general rule is that each person may speak twice on each subject per day. This is in your Rules of Procedure 7.1, and each speech may be up to 10 minutes. You can tell that he wrote this in the 19th century when they had a lot more time. Higher ordinance. So they were very happy when they learned that they could put a stop to that. Yes?
And with that one, the one before this
Go
one,
back to the previous one.
where you say only, we do have that in our policy, but if no one else is asking questions, and it's obvious that no one else is asking questions, can that person still raise her hand and follow up with another question?
You would have to suspend the rules. You would have to suspend the rules, which I was not planning on covering, but I will talk about it at the end, because it can really be a trap for people. Yes?
So I'm still, she's texting. He's talking about the $10 million surplus. When do I say, point of order?
I would be inclined to wait till he finishes his report and then speak up immediately.
And she's already done texting.
Well, but you're making the point right at the time of the violation.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so then the issue, the council would have to address the issue for the future.
Okay. And that probably our deputy mayor would say, point well taken, there will be no, just a reminder, we're not going to be texting.
Yes?
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yeah. Okay, so during the meeting, members may also move to limit debate or to extend debate or to call the question. And again, because of the shortness of time, I'm not going to go into all the technical side of this. And we do have a treatment of call the question in the book. We did not have an entry on limiting debate, but it's can't be debated. and it takes a 2/3 vote to pass. So a member could say, I move that we limit debate to 15 minutes total. And if 2/3 of you are in favor, that would pass just for that particular discussion. Now, why 2/3? Robert requires a 2/3 vote when members' rights are limited or extended. So if all the council members are present and voting, 2/3 is going to be 5 votes out of 7. It's going to be a high bar. It's a high bar that has to be set. But that is a tool that you have. And I'm sure you all know, but I'll just remind you, that if someone calls the question, that does not mean that you stop debate right then. That means that that person would like to stop debate, and it takes a second, and it takes a vote to do it. So it's a very common misuse. Someone says, call the question, says, okay, we vote now. That's completely wrong. And that there's a full treatment of that in the book. Now, I just want to finally mention that we recognize in Jurassic Parliament that sometimes there can be benefit in the conversational style, in informal discussion. This can provide a kind of sparky flow of ideas that can be beneficial. So it's okay for a member to say, I move that we discuss this in conversational style for 10 minutes or for 15 minutes. You can do that, but my plea, my desperate plea to you is, please don't make the conversational style your ordinary default way of discussing. It is not effective for business meetings. But I just want to prove that we're human, and we know that sometimes people do like to have a conversation. So you can do it, but you got to be careful. So these are what we call the 4 big mistakes: speaking twice in a row, not seeking recognition, speaking directly to another member, and interrupting another person. And just in a little bit, I'm going to give you some tools. I'm going to give you some tools that you can use when this happens. So now let's go back to our meeting and talk about keeping order. So I'd like to take up our next item of business, which is the motion to pay the legal expenses for Councilmember Brenda Brontosaurus in connection with the lawsuit pertaining to her postings on the City of Dinopolis blog. Does anyone care to make that motion? A friendly member.
I move that since a lawsuit has been brought against Councilmember Brenda Brontosaurus in connection with her postings on the City of Dinopolis blog, the city will cover all her legal expenses.
19?
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded that since a lawsuit has been brought against Councilmember Brenda Brontosaurus in connection with her postings on the City of Dinopolis blog, the city will cover all her legal expenses. Now, the person who makes a motion has the right to speak first. Do you care to speak to your motion, Mr. Friendly Member?
Yes. Well, Brenda is a good friend of mine, and she didn't mean any harm by those postings. I think that this is just the right thing to do. I hope that all the other members will agree.
Thank you. Any further discussion? 21?
I have to say that in my opinion, Brenda is just a big dope. She's as dumb as a sack of mackerel. Her remarks make us look like a laughing stock.
22?
Point of order.
State your point.
Personal remarks and insults are not allowed in Robert's Rules of Order.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from making such improper remarks. So let's look a little bit. Order is critical to fair and democratic meetings, and order is achieved by having rules and following them. If a body doesn't follow its rules, consequences will occur. So within the council, the chair, whoever's presiding, has the duty of maintaining order and decorum. But if the chair fails to do so, any member may speak up. Any member may speak up. So as we saw, a point of order is a flying dinosaur. When another member breaks one of the rules, a member may make a point of order, and the chair rules on the point. Bless you. So this is a definition. A point of order is a motion claiming that a procedural mistake has been made. According to Robert, it can only be made by a member of the body. The public does not get to make a point of order. They don't get to stand up in the audience there and say, point of order. That's not their role. Now, 2 really important points. It may interrupt a speaker if necessary. Again, we recommend caution. And it must be timely. You have to make it at the time of the offense. There are a few exceptions, but they are rare. So there's 4 steps to process a point of order. The member says point of order, the chair says state your point, the member gives the reason, that remark breaks our rule against interrupting, and then the chair says the point is well taken, members will refrain from interrupting each other, or not well taken, which we'll come to in a little bit. So let's review our jargon. What do you say if you're a member and you see a violation?
Point of order.
And if you're the chair, what do you say?
State your point.
And the member says it, and then if you agree with it, what do you say?
Point is well taken.
And if you disagree with it?
The point is not well taken.
Excellent, excellent. You just have to get it in your mouth, you know, it's a different thing. All right, so notice that, this is a language tip. use the third person to keep things neutral and lessen conflict. The chair is stating the general rule. It's like you're the voice of Robert, you know. Members will refrain from improper statements. You're speaking on behalf of the rules of procedure. Don't say you are out of order or you made a mistake. I was at a council meeting once where the mayor said, John, I think you're off topic. It is not the way to go. It is not the way to go. But again, it takes practice to get this language down. And when in doubt, ask the group. The chair can always ask the council to decide if a point of order is correct or well taken or whether it's not. So if you're not sure whether bozo is an insult or not, you can ask the council to decide. And that's a wonderful way to get out of the heat. Notice that the chair doesn't have to say point of order because the chair already has the duty of maintaining order and decorum. So the chair just needs to take appropriate action. All right, so now we're going to go back to our meeting, and it's time for me as mayor to comment that speaking personally, in my view, it would be a travesty of justice for this council to pay the expenses of that old bag Brenda. She's just an interfering biddy.
Point of order, madam.
State your point.
The chair can't say things like that. She has to follow the same rule as all the rest of us.
Oh, the point is well taken. The chair apologizes. So if a chair breaks one of the rules, a member can make a point of order, and then the chair rules on her own behavior, which seems very odd, but that's the way the system works. So the chair must follow the same rules as everybody else. I don't get to make those nasty remarks about Brenda. All right, so further discussion, 26.
We've had some pretty hefty legal expenses already this year, so I'm against this motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? 27.
I'm concerned about keeping a bright light between council members' remarks as individuals and their official capacity. I am against paying these legal expenses for someone who's cognitively challenged.
Point of order.
State your point.
The words cognitively challenged are an insult.
So the chair rules that the point is not well taken.
Challenged.
The point is not well taken, and the words may be used. You've got another line there.
I do.
It's until the chair has responded to your point of order before saying loudly, appeal.
Okay, 31.
Second.
Okay, so this is the magic moment. She made a remark, she's used some terms, the friendly member said that they were offensive. The chair ruled that they were not offensive, and now the friendly member has appealed the decision of the chair, and it's been seconded. And actually, according to your rules, it doesn't even need a second. Any member can appeal a ruling of the chair. So this is what we regard as the most important motion in all of Robert's rules, and the least known. Nobody knows about appeal. So the chair enforces order and decorum, but the group is the final authority. And on your council, any member can appeal a ruling of the chair. It's Council Rule 7.5. Now there is an exception. Robert says that if the ruling is a matter of fact on which there cannot be two interpretations, then you can't appeal it. Like what's written in the rules, that's a matter of fact. But obviously, whether the words cognitively challenged are an insult or not, that's a subjective matter, that's not objective. So the chair has to be careful in explaining to the members, because the idea is the ruling of the chair stands unless it's overturned. Unless it's overturned. So I'm going to ask you in a moment to vote on the question, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? So if you agree with me, with my ruling, that the words cognitively challenged are just fine, you're going to vote yes. If you disagree with the appellant that they're an insult, you're going to vote no. So it's kind of counterintuitive. And so you can vote your conscience on this. I don't care. So vote any way you like. So the question I put to you is this. Shall the ruling of the chair that the words cognitively challenged are not an insult be sustained? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
I'm sorry. Cognitively challenged is a nice way to say stupid.
So the ruling of the chair is overturned.
I think this whole group's safe.
And members may not use this term. Clerk, kindly write that in the minutes, get that down there. So points of order and appeals are supposed to be recorded in the minutes because they become precedent for the future. So everybody knows that we can't use cognitively challenged. So And notice that some, though not all, appeals can be debated. And we're going to have an example of that in a little bit. But be alert, because the debate process is different from anything else in Robert's Rules. So we believe that this is the heart of democracy. This is the heart of democracy. By using point of order and appeal, the group is the final authority. And it's a critical thing. It's a critical thing for our society. So let's resume our discussion on paying the legal fees. Number 32.
In my opinion, we set a bad precedent if we cover Brenda's legal expenses. Every council member ought to have their own liability insurance to deal with things like this.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. And on this one, you can vote your conscience. So all those in favor of paying the legal expenses for Brenda Brontosaurus in connection with her lawsuit pertaining to her remarks on the blog, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Phew, she's going to hang. All right, that's the end of Brenda. All right, so now let's look at inappropriate remarks. Inappropriate remarks. So it's a fundamental principle of parliamentary procedure that debate must be germane, which means relevant, to the topic at hand. And certain kinds of remarks are inappropriate because they are not relevant to the discussion. So these are the 5 kinds of remarks that are inappropriate. I'm going to take them one by one. Madam Banker, can you read us the first one?
Personal remarks.
Personal remarks. The next one, Mr. Chef?
Let's see. Certain kinds of remarks are inappropriate because they are not relevant to the discussion.
Right, but take a look at the next page, if you
Oh,
would.
the next page,
slide,
okay.
and number
Oh.
2.
Discourteous remarks, insulting language, and attacks.
Next one,
Inflammatory language.
next one,
Criticizing past actions of the group unless subject is under discussion or member is about to propose a change.
and the next one.
What page are we on?
27.
27.
27.
I'm having the same issue.
Sorry, it's also on the screen, though. So 27,
Oh, it says 107 down there.
that's the slide number, so.
Okay, which one did you just do?
You want to
You're
do
on-
number 5.
Last one. 5.
Sorry, I should have helped us find our place.
Here we go. Remarks that are not germane relevant to this discussion.
So germane is a jargon word. I used to think it meant German, but it doesn't. It means relevant.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the umbrella for all of these. So let's quickly look at them. Robert says the measure, not the member, is the subject of debate. So that's the kind of basic, fundamental Robertian principle. Discourteous remarks speaks for itself, and this also applies to remarks about the public and other non-members. Why the rules on courtesy? Here's a quote from the Dalai Lama. Generally speaking, if a human being never shows anger, then I think something's wrong. He's not right in the brain. I love it that this great avatar of peace is acknowledging the role of emotion in our human nature. It's a very important feature. But then we also have Mahatma Gandhi. Anger and intolerance are the enemies of correct understanding. So we know a lot now about how the human brain works, and it's the prefrontal cortex, the part right behind the forehead, that is capable of long-range thinking and executive action and considering the consequences of what we're discussing. And when the amygdala, the little almond-shaped piece in the middle, sends out signals of fear and rage, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. So, when people use that kind of language, basically they're frying the brains of everybody in the room. It takes about 8 minutes for everybody to come back to normal, to a normal setting. So this is our recommendation, best practices: no sarcasm, no frowning, no eye rolling, no sighing, no checking cell phones. I worked with a city last week, and they had a member who was such an eye roller that when I said this, everybody on the council just burst out laughing, because not only would he roll his eyes, he would roll his whole head. And he did it several times during my presentation, so I had to keep myself under strong self-control. Yes?
And so if we see the eye rolling, we should do point of order. If we see eye rolling from staff that don't report to us because they belong to the mayor, then we should report it to the mayor.
Well, you can report at the mayor, or I think that's a good step. I think it would also be reasonable to say the member requests, notice the use of third person, that the staff employ the same courtesy towards council members that council members are endeavoring to employ towards them.
Okay.
So, it's not only a matter of rules, it's also the culture that one has. Yes?
On the same comment, can we call and ask them, do you have something to say?
You mean calling on a staff member?
Yeah.
So the council has the right, as a body, to call on anybody whom it wishes to address it. That's a basic thing. You don't have to wait for public comment or staff reports. For the sake of order, it's usually best to take the staff input at the time of the motion that they're presenting. We recommend that the staff present the matter, that there be questions and answers, that someone move acceptance of the motion in a second, and then the council hold its discussion. We think that's a nice, clean way to do it. But what you would do is you would turn to the chair and say, if allowable, I'd like to ask a staff member a question. And it's always subject to the chair's decision, subject to appeal. The chair is controlling these things, but if a member feels that it's not right, the decision isn't right, the member can appeal it. And as I mentioned, in your case, a single member can appeal. So now I've worked with some councils where it was not a city, it was a special district, where they had one member who consistently and over again kept on wanting to spend 20 or 5 minutes with the staff, and it became very burdensome, and so they enforced the 2 times rule very strictly, and he would appeal it, and they'd overturn it, and then they'd go on to the next thing. So, you know, it's up to you how you want to handle it. So inflammatory language is not allowed. The example is, that's a lie, and the recommended parliamentary phrase is, I believe that there is strong evidence that the member is mistaken. Or you can quote Winston Churchill, who in the House of Commons used that word, it's a lie, and he was called to order, and he said, very well, I will say instead that the member is guilty of terminological inexactitude. So when we say not inflammatory, it means you can make your claim, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't send people's blood pressure through the roof. Criticizing past actions. This is an interesting one. Members may not criticize a past action of the group during a meeting, with 2 exceptions. If the group as a whole is discussing the action, it's fine to criticize it. Or if you plan to introduce a motion to amend it or rescind it at the end of your speech, then you can criticize it. Now, this is not likely going to happen on a council because you have to give notice and you have to have preparations. But for instance, at least in the city of Dinopolis, where they haven't got so many notice rules, you can say, building that skateboard park was the worst thing we ever did, and I move that we tear it down. That's fine. But you can't say, building that skateboard park was the worst thing we ever did. You're not allowed to make random criticisms. I worked with one council where the elected mayor had the habit at the end of each meeting of explaining to the 7 council members what stupid decisions they had just made. And the council members were very happy to learn that he couldn't do that under Robert's Rules of Order, and I like to feel that it might have played some small part in his decision not to run again. Let's have civility. All right, so, and then this is the broadest one, remarks that are not germane. Discussion must be relevant to the topic at hand, and we recommend that councils be pretty ruthless about this. The chair can call a member to order if remarks are not germane, or a member can call another member to order. And always remember, if any question arises as to whether a remark is appropriate or not, or a comment is germane, the chair rules subject to appeal, or the chair may also turn immediately to the council to ask the members to decide. Ultimately, it's the council's call. Yes, Bill?
A member can call another member to order.
Yes.
So what if the chair doesn't agree with that?
Well, then you'd appeal it. You'd appeal it.
No, but can the chair make a direction to the other council? Do you agree with that, members?
Sure, absolutely. And it's often wise to do so. It's often, if it's a difficult situation. And we're going to have an example of that in our little script that's coming up. Yes?
At the end of our council meetings, we have a section where we're supposed to speak on committees and
Reports, right?
reports.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get philosophical lessons on historical whatever that really may not be germane to committee reports or those kinds of things. Can we call for a point of order there and then say that it's really not germane, and then go through the whole process of the deputy mayor deciding whether, now this is at a council meeting, so then would the mayor decide whether it's germane or not?
So it's a little different when you have that kind of open-ended council comments section. Robert doesn't envision that. You know, Robert was not written for city councils. It was written for what are called ordinary societies, and so there are a lot of gaps. There are things that aren't there. And my personal interpretation would be that a group should interpret council remarks pretty liberally.
Okay.
Within the time frame. You don't want people using it to give 10-minute or 15-minute speeches. But I think that the intention of that is to allow the members to speak about what's on their mind. And I would be disinclined to be encouraging people to talk about germaneness under that setting, because it's pretty broadly written as I read your remarks. And that's also a case of culture and custom, you know, and you all might decide you want to change your custom. But if since you have that, that's my thought about it. All right, so here's a language tip. Members will kindly keep their remarks strictly to the topic under discussion. Members will kindly keep their remarks strictly to the topic under discussion. That's for the chair. So I just want to mention here that we are speaking about discussion within the council meetings. Within the council meetings. These prohibitions do not apply to the public when they are giving public comment. They do not apply. The public has much broader freedom to speak than you do, curiously enough. And we have in the back of your packet our paper on guidelines for public comment. So I hope that you'll find that helpful. And of course, again, if there's any difference between what I say and what your attorney says, listen to your attorney. And we recommend that council members follow these rules outside meetings as well. We believe that this will increase the reputation and stature of the council in the public. Speak to issues and not to personalities. Yes?
And some of the boards or committees that I'm on take public comment, and some of them will only allow public comment on items on the agenda, and some will say if you make comments or derogatory comments or use profanity about any member of the board, your time will be eliminated. You are not allowed to speak. Is that appropriate?
Talk to your attorney. Mr. Attorney, what's the case?
Well, there, by opening up the opportunity for people to speak generally rather than to a specific topic, the city council meetings have a component of limited public free speech, limited public forum. And the court cases are not particularly kind to abridgment of that. There's one case, Santa Clara City Council, where it happened to be he was an attorney on the audience, and he gave a swastika salute to the city council, and they tried to call him out of order and eject him from the meeting. He took it to court, and the Ninth Circuit, with the Court of Appeal, the District Court, trial court, ruled in the city's favor. It was appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and they ruled that unless the disturbance is sufficient enough to actually delay council action, it's not an interruption, because you have to tolerate some level of free speech. I apologize for talking so long, but...
No, it's a very important point. And because I say this because a poor council member out on the peninsula took this training, and then she was running, she was deputy mayor, and she was running the public comment session, and it started to get pretty wild. She and 3 colleagues were referred to as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and she cut it off, and she ended up getting censured for violating free speech. So the courts, generally, you know, if there's a quarrel between the jurisdiction and the citizen, often the jurisdiction loses. In the city of Boulder, a person of the public dropped his pants at the podium, and he ended up walking away with $14,000 settlement because it was considered that the city had mishandled his First Amendment rights in dealing with it. So you really want to be careful, and I completely agree that the disruption is the issue. And mere words or actions are not necessarily a disruption. Yes?
But couldn't that member who had dropped his pants, couldn't he have been arrested for
Indecency. Sure.
exposure?
I mean, there's this, but
different ways to handle it.
Yes,
just
absolutely. And I'd say, please talk to your attorney. I'm not your expert on this, really.
Yolanda and I would faint and have a heart attack, and so it would have disrupted the process.
Well, that's true. We certainly hope that wouldn't happen. And we hope that the citizens of Auburn won't engage in this. So now we have a very quick exercise here. called What's Wrong Here? So again, we're gonna pair up with our neighbor, and you've got a sheet of 5 different remarks. Next page, 5 different remarks. So I invite you to identify what kind of error it is, and it can be more than one. It could be more than one. So just take about 3 minutes for this. Don't take a lot of time over it, but just run down and write, whatever you think it is.
The first one is a number 1.
Right.
That's personal. That's a
Vote we took earlier.
Number
Very
2.
unfortunate.
It's also-
Is criticizing past actions, 4. See the article in the paper about
Distinguished
those little fossils. Oh, that's another personal remark, isn't it? Or inflammatory language.
2 and 3. I think she said there could be more than one.
Oh, okay.
mustaches and all that. Transfer of money.
Transfer of money between funds last year was never approved by this council.
It's very unfortunate. We'll come back to bite us. A huge increase like that.
Going on.
It's hard. We're going to suffer the public
years.
rules for this.
So that would be
Is number 5. Don't you think?
Yeah, it could be.
could be a
yeah.
couple, she said, each one. I'm talking
Do they have 2 of them in there? I
Yeah, they
only
can.
see 5 in there though.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of the negatives you bring to our issue. It's people like you. I've heard that here in council.
Yeah, I don't know
Nice.
about number
No,
2.
it's
So
not.
it's a personal remark.
Yeah.
It's discourteous.
Yes.
It's inflammatory.
Yeah.
2 and 3.
I don't know about the others, yeah.
Okay, so let's quickly take them. Can you read us the first one and tell us what you think it is?
The first one, the
First,
mayor
read the
being,
sentence.
the mayor is a senior citizen after all, and we know what that means. It's a 1,
Yeah.
really
remark.
personal,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about the next one, Bill?
Okay, we put 4.
Can you read it for me?
Oh, sure. I think that the vote we took earlier today was very unfortunate and will come back to bite us. A huge increase like that will hit our residents hard. We're going to suffer in the public opinions poll for this, number 4.
Yes, criticizing a past action. You could say that during debate, that'd be fine. But once the vote's taken, that's out of order. Claude, next one?
Did you see that article in the paper about the Distinguished Mustache Society? Those old fossils look so cute in their fancy mustaches and straw hats. It reminded me of my grandpa in the happy days when I was a young tyke.
What do you think?
Basically said that's not germane to the discussion.
Absolutely.
Oh, 5.
Bob?
That transfer of money between funds last year was never approved by this council. If there had been embezzlement going on, we would have failed in our duty as public servants. We thought number 4.
It's all 4, but I think it's also 3. I don't think, the word embezzlement to me is inflammatory. If you think there's hanky-panky going on, talk to the deputy prosecutor, talk to the county prosecutor. Don't be throwing that word around, And I was at the council meeting where that was said, by the way, so I didn't make all of these up. I won't tell you who. Next one? John?
I'm sick and tired of the negative attitude you bring to our issues. It's people like you who keep us from attracting the best and the brightest to run for this council.
So what do you think?
1 for sure, and 2.
Yeah, definitely. And that's also a direct quote. I worked with a board that had a lot of trouble, believe me, they were really in issues. So the problem is, it's what we call the deer in the headlights problem. You hear something, you know it's wrong, but it's a hard mental process to identify what's wrong with it, and then to have the correct response on the tip of your tongue. So we have a nice little cheat sheet for you, which I hope you will be glad to have, and it gives you answers for all of these. And so it's set up in 3 different columns. So on the left-hand side, we've got the big mistakes, and we've got the inappropriate remarks. And by the way, an article on these inappropriate remarks is on a website for free download, and also an article on point of order and appeal, which goes a little bit beyond what's in our book. So, and I have copies of these for the staff as well. So this is called, wait, what should I say? So if you're the chair, you're gonna run your finger down this first column here. Those are the chair's responses. If you're the member, and it's another member who's breaking the rules, you're gonna run your finger down the middle column. The middle column gives you the things that you can say when things go wrong. And if you're the member and it's the chair who's breaking the rules, Then you have the third column on the right. So as I mentioned, you know, learning this stuff is like learning a foreign language. When I was in the Congo with my husband in the Consulate General in Lubumbashi, I was trying to learn French, and I felt very self-conscious. So I would try to pretend that I was a character in a very bad French movie. So that's what I recommend to you. Pretend that you're Alec Guinness, you know, with a British accent, saying, members will kindly refrain from improper remarks. I mean, you want to get that language in your mouth. You want to be able to say it because it's the language of Robert's rules, and it depersonalizes things. And then when you have this in your hot little hand, you know, and somebody says something that's personal, you can say, point of order, state your point, personal remarks are not allowed. You've got the tip right here, the tip sheet. And just for your reference, it also has on the back the precedence of motions chart. So if you get into the question of which motions are allowed.
So,
yes.
big mistakes.
Yes.
Speaking, the first item, speaking
Yes.
twice in a row.
Yes.
And I'm hovering in on the chair. So the chair can, and she does, the mayor does this, she says, she looks around and she kind of remembers in her head, oh, that guy or that council member has already spoken twice.
Mm-hmm.
So she'll go and find somebody who is raising their hand.
Good.
And ask them, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but there may not be anyone else that wants to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So the mayor or the chair then would say, okay, you can continue with your,
If they haven't exhausted their 2 times.
well, what happens if they have?
Well, that would require suspending the rules or passing that motion to extend debate. I move to suspend the rules and allow members to speak a further time. That's how you would do it. But let's not get into it yet, please, because I really want to get through the main content.
All right.
But thank you for the question. So this is copyrighted, by the way. Please do not photocopy this. We do sell them, and we make a lot of other material available for free. And I would like also to invite you, if you are interested, to consider keeping in touch by subscribing to our newsletter. It's a free monthly newsletter, and we try to keep it short and interesting. Oh, thank you.
I'm finally getting it.
You're getting it.
Yes.
Good. And if you don't want to sign up, it'll be fine, because everybody has too many emails anyway. But I also have another offer for you. We are now posting weekly blog postings, so pretty much on Tuesdays. And you have to sign up for that yourself. I can't do it for you. But if you care to go to our website and click on the blog, you can look at the local government postings and see if you think they might be relevant. Now, I cover a lot of different topics, but we've published 3 very important postings on public comment in the month of March.
On the email,
Yes,
can it be my personal
Whatever you
email
like.
and not my city
whatever you
email?
like. Whatever you like is fine. So, and also, I just want to mention, I have a feature on my website where I have office hours. You can schedule a free phone call that suits your convenience. I'm happy to do it, or you can send me an email. I love parliamentary questions, so please feel free to be in touch. So now, let's talk about the authority of the chair. And I think I'm not going to take this card exercise just because of the interest of time. I'll just talk to you about the flow of authority. So this is the fundamental flow of authority. The group adopts its rules and guidelines. And you have it, by the way, on the very back of your handout. If you turn to the absolute last page of your handout, you'll see this very nicely laid out. The group adopts its rules and guidelines, which you have done. In attending, members accept the rules of the group. If you're elected or appointed to a city council or a planning commission or an arts commission, you are bound by the rules of that group. You can ask to change them, but you don't get to say, I didn't choose these, so I won't follow them. That's not allowed. During meetings, the presiding officer, the chair, applies the rules for the benefit of the group. So the chair is actually a benevolent dictator, because it's the rules the group chose, and he or she is applying them for the benefit of the group. And all persons present at a meeting have an obligation to obey the legitimate orders of the presiding officer. Now, the key word to me in that is legitimate. I worked with one city that had this in their rules. All persons present at a meeting must obey the mayor. Go pick up my laundry and get me a latte on the way, you know. Legitimate orders. Any member who disagrees with a ruling, decision, or order by the presiding officer may appeal the ruling. If another member seconds the appeal, the group will decide by majority vote whether the ruling, decision, or order is legitimate, and the presiding officer obeys the group's decision. So you see, it's the absolute opposite of that pyramid. It's the complete reverse of the pyramid. And that's, I think, why it's hard mentally sometimes for us to get this. So the chair must control the meeting discussion. The chair must control the meeting discussion. The chair serves as a benevolent dictator, enforcing the rules the group has chosen. And, you know, the modern style is completely different. We're encouraged to speak softly and gently and use I statements. If your child is pulling the cat's tail, you're supposed to say, oh, have a cookie, and distract them instead of saying, stop it, stop it. Well, you want to forget all that when you're running a meeting. We recommend a balancing act. You project both confidence and humility. You speak clearly and definitely, but at the same time, you keep emotionally connected to the members. So we recommend a brisk, warm neutrality. Brisk, warm neutrality. It's important to be businesslike and focused and keep things moving, and at the same time, show humanity and humor where appropriate. And I want to say it's exhausting. This style is very tiring because the chair has to really be tuned in to where everybody is and who's looking to speak and who's had a chance, and it takes a lot of mental energy to do that. So this is an excellent book, Compelling People, by John Neffinger and Matthew Kohut. I really recommend it to you, and they make an interesting point. They say that when we first meet someone, we assess them on two different dimensions. One dimension is, how strong are you? How capable? Can you get done what you want in the world, and can you get done what I want? The other dimension is, how warm are you? How much do you care about other people, and how much do you care about me? Well, the interesting point is that to a certain extent, the two qualities are in a hydraulic relationship. So the stronger you appear, the colder you appear, and the warmer you appear, the weaker you appear. And a good chair is able to convey both. A good chair conveys both strength and warmth. I know one mayor who's given away 3 copies of that book and read it twice, so it's really worth your time. So the chair must control the discussion. If someone speaks up without being recognized, you stop them. If someone speaks out of turn, you interrupt them. If someone makes insulting remarks, you stop them. How should you do this? How to control? Well, we recommend the crouching tiger method. You see that this Sumatran beauty is lying there perfectly at ease, perfectly alert, but the minute that something happens, she pounces. You know, don't wait through halfway through the meeting to try to enforce the rules. And education is essential. People have to know. You can't just suddenly start, you know, go to your Rotary Club and start calling point of order on people. You have to help them understand what's going on. And this is a quote from Robert. Under no circumstances does the chair attempt to drown out a disorderly member or permit himself to be drawn into a verbal duel. So this kind of thing is absolutely forbidden. And in dealing with any case of disorder, the presiding officer should always maintain a calm, deliberate tone, although he may become increasingly firm if a situation demands it. So you want to avoid this, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Very unfortunate situation. So the chair should never get excited. The chair should never get excited. So controlling the meeting in a positive way is both an art and a skill. It's like learning a foreign language. Practice the jargon and you'll get better at it. So in the back of your handout, on the other side of those principles that we were just looking at, you have a language tips for meeting management. So the inside back page, and that's also available for free download on our website. So it gives you the language, just that. There we go. Language tips for meeting management. So all these different tips I've been giving you, the kind of language. And I really like the quote which came from an editor of the Spokane Review. This woman was writing about him. She said, he was always firm, fair, and friendly. Firm, fair, and friendly. I think that's a very good target to aim for. So the chair must control the discussion, recognize members, interrupt a member who breaks the rules, be fair at all times, and remain calm. The chair must not participate too much in the debate, lecture or criticize, try to control the content of the debate, get all emotional, or interrupt a speaker because he knows more than the speaker about the subject. So now we're going to put all this into practice, and we're going to read through a script. And I have to tell you that I wrote this script before I ever met you, so don't take any of it personally. People do sometimes say to me after this script, they say, were you attending our council meetings? But I am not. And in order to be, there are 8 roles, and in order to be fully fair, I've taken the roles and I've turned them inside, so I don't know who's going to pick which role. Pick one.
Thank you, Ann.
Oh,
Who did you get?
artist.
An artist.
Oh, sure.
Oh, that fits you. It does. I like the burnt-out artist.
So whoever has the chair, I have a gavel for you. There we go.
Yeah.
Now, this is a busy speaking role. Are you ready to be very on the spot?
Oh, Professor, yes.
I'm always on the spot.
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
No doubt.
So all we're gonna do is read through it. This is no, there's no improvisation necessary. But I hope that it will clarify and demonstrate some of the things that we've been talking about. So you, if you want to, you can go through your script and mark what your role is. If you like to just put a circle around when you're gonna speak. I've got copies for the staff as well. So they can follow along. I told you, a lot of words there. Big heavy roll, a big part.
That's
Makes you
you.
work. Okay, Mr. Chair, will you bang the gavel and call this meeting to order?
Oh, this is one of those. Oh, no, it didn't. Is it supposed to?
It's just a little thing. It doesn't, yeah, that's enough. That's all it
Oh,
does.
all right. I
Well,
thought
you
it.
just canceled us, too. Now we're adjourned.
You want me to begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Council members may now propose motion to use our fiscal surplus.
I move that we use half our surplus to build a performing arts center on the vacant lot we own.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded that we use half the surplus to build a performing arts center on the vacant lot we own. Do you care to speak to your motion?
Yes, dinosaurs love high culture, and opera is the highest of high culture. We can stage the great operas like Turandino.
This is a terrible idea. I think you're just suggesting that because you're trying to curry favors with the public before you run for Arts Commissioner next year.
Members are reminded that it is not in order to make personal remarks about other members. Also, kindly address all remarks to the chair.
Chair, I have to say that I'm sick and tired of spending money on high culture. We've already invested $500,000 in the museum, which was a big waste of funding.
Point of order.
The point is well taken.
State your
Whoop,
point.
I'm sorry. Members may criticize.
So you say
No, you
right
say
here,
number
state your
10.
point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
State your point.
Members are not, may not criticize past actions at a meeting.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from such improper comments.
Don't you think it's time the culture vultures retired from the scene? They don't bring anything to our region that we need.
Point of order.
State your point.
The words culture vultures are an insult.
The chair rules that these words are not insulting and may be used.
I appeal.
I'll second that.
Very well. The council will decide. As you know, appeals pertaining to language and decorum are not debatable, so we will simply take the vote. Chair has ruled that the words culture vultures are not insulting. All those who believe that the ruling of the chair should be sustained, please say aye.
Aye.
Those who believe that it should not be sustained, please say no.
No.
The noes have it, and the ruling of the chair is not sustained. Members may not use this term. It seems to me that this council is behaving like a bunch of nitwits. Your chair is very knowledgeable about parliamentary procedure, so why don't you just listen to what the chair says and do it?
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
The chair may not use that kind of insulting language.
Oh, the point is well taken. The chair apologizes for the error. We will continue debate on the motion to build a performing arts center.
Chair, I think we need to invest money in athletics and sports. Many dinosaurs are overweight and they need to get more exercise. I move that we use the entire surplus to build a sports complex to include bungee jumping.
Second.
Very well. It has been moved and seconded that we use the entire surplus to build a sports complex to include bungee jumping.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
We already have a main motion on the floor. We can't take up another motion now.
Oh, the point is well taken. Bungee jumper. We will have to wait to consider whether to build a sports complex. Is there further discussion on the motion to build a performing arts center?
I'm against subsidizing the screeching of overweight old ladies at public expense.
Point of order.
State your point.
That is a personal and insulting remark.
The point is well taken. Members will kindly refrain from remarks of this nature.
I have an idea. I move that we amend the motion by striking the words Performing Arts Center and inserting the words Sports Complex.
Second.
Very well. It has been moved and seconded that we amend the motion by striking the words Performing Arts Center and inserting the words Sports Complex.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
That changes the entire purpose of my motion.
The chair rules that the point is not well taken.
I appeal the ruling of the chair.
Second.
Very well. The ruling of the chair has been appealed. We will now debate the matter under Robert's Rules of Order. The chair begins debate by explaining the basis of the ruling. The chair observes that Robert allows this type of amendment. The chair points to page 125 of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised 11th edition, which says, a motion to ratify can be amended by substituting a motion of censure and vice versa. Further discussion? Each person may speak once, and then the chair will speak a second time. Opera fan?
It just seems wrong-headed to me.
Well, that may be what Robert Rules says, but our very own council rules of procedure says on page 10, no amendment to any resolution shall be allowed which shall change the scope and object of the resolution.
Very well. The chair acknowledges that our own rules of procedure have higher standing than our parliamentary authority. Thank you for pointing that out, Professor. In light of this fact, the chair reverses the ruling and confirms that the point is well taken and the amendment cannot be considered. Clerk, please be sure that this ruling is recorded in the minutes. Is there further discussion on the motion?
I move to amend the motion by adding the words, and decorate the entry hall of the Performing Arts Center with original paintings by local artists.
Do you care to speak to your motion, artist?
We need to support our local creative artists, and this will be a great opportunity.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
Nobody has seconded that motion.
Oh, the point is well taken. Is there a second?
Second.
Very well. It has been moved and seconded that we amend the motion by adding the words, and decorate the entire hall of the Performing Arts Center with original paintings by local artists. Is there any discussion?
Wait just a minute here. Isn't it a conflict of interest for the artist to propose something that will benefit the artist?
No. Under Robert's Rules of Order, a member is free to propose something that benefits an entire class of persons of which he is a member. Conflict of interest refers to an individual and particular interest, usually financial. Further discussion?
Visual arts is just a scam, and artists are parasites on society who should put their paintbrushes away and earn an honest living.
That remark is completely contrary to Robert's rules. Members will kindly refrain from making insulting and personal remarks. Further discussion on the amendment?
I think it's a good idea. Original art will make the performing arts complex even more grand and glorious.
As far as I'm concerned, our educational system is just wasting time when we teach children the arts. They need to learn practical skills like engineering and accounting.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
The conditions of the educational system is not germane to this discussion.
The chair will ask the group to decide about this point. All those who believe that the condition of the educational system is germane, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who believe it is not germane, please say no.
No.
Wow.
The noes have it. The noes have it, and we will not discuss the state of the educational system.
Point of order, Chair.
State your question.
Just how large is our surplus anyway?
As reported by the financial officer, it is $10 million. Further discussion on the motion to build a performing arts complex?
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
We are still discussing the proposed amendment.
On the point is, the point is well taken. The chair apologizes for the error. Further discussion on the amendment?
I love the arts, but I think that this council is putting us on the straight and narrow path to the poorhouse. If we weren't all such flaming liberals, you'd see the need for fiscal conservatism.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
The words flaming liberals are inflammatory.
Well, I'm proud to be called a flaming liberal. Let me tell you, so I have to say that the point is not well taken.
I appeal from the ruling of the chair.
Second.
Very well. The ruling of the chair has been appealed and seconded. Again, appeals pertaining to language are not debatable. The chair has ruled that the words flaming liberals are not inflammatory. All those who agree that this ruling should be sustained, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
The chair could vote in this matter, but there is no need. There are 3 in favor and 3 opposed, which means the vote is tied. The appeal fails and members may use this term. Clerk, please be sure that this is recorded in the minutes. Let us resume discussion on the amendment.
As a performer and a member of our creative community, I believe that this is a sensible and appropriate way to give pleasure and delight to our citizens.
Did you hear about the tragedy in California? There was an artist's residence in Oakland that was a real fire trap. Many of the artists are living on the economic cliff. Spending our surplus to support them will make a big difference.
The artist is just saying that because they're a painter and have a personal interest in this subject.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
Personal remarks are not allowed. Robert Rules says on page 392, the measure, not the member, is a subject of debate.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from personal remarks. Is there any further discussion on the motion to amend? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor of amending the motion by adding the words "and decorate the entire hall of the Performing Arts Center with original paintings by local artists," please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it, and the motion passes. The amended motion now reads, to build a performing arts center on the vacant lot we own and decorate the entire hall with original paintings by local artists.
Division.
A division has been called for, so we will retake the vote on the motion to amend by a different method. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Hands down. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. Oh, it seems that the noes have it. The chair apologizes for the error. The motion fails, and we will now add the amendment to the main motion.
We will not add the amendment.
Yeah.
You should have said point of order.
I am sick and tired of the arrogant way our chair runs these meetings. This is a fascist way to arrange things. Where is the true democracy that we inherited in our Constitution?
You've got a line there, Mr. Chair.
No, I know that. I was just being funny. Movie fan, the chair has repeatedly directed you to refrain from offensive personal references and inflammatory language when speaking, and yet the vituperation and vilification continues. Robert's Rules of Order and our own council rules of procedure require that all discussion be focused on issues, not on personalities. Kindly participate in our discussions without creating these distractions.
Well, colleagues, I realize that I've let myself get carried away. I apologize for my behavior.
Thank you, movie fan. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will take the vote. The motion is that we will use half the surplus to build a performing arts center on the vacant lot that we own. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it, and the motion passes. We will use half the surplus to build a performing arts center. Thank you all.
In my opinion, there will be a lot of pushback from the community on this. A sports complex would appeal to many more of our residents.
Point of order. Once we've taken the vote, no further discussion on that topic is allowed during the meeting.
Yes, the point is well taken.
Well, I think that's a ridiculous rule anyway. Under the First Amendment, we ought to be able to say what we think.
The member is reminded that once a ruling has been made on a point of order, the only discussion allowed is to appeal the ruling. And as our attorney has advised us, the courts have found that local governments have the ability to regulate the time, place, and manner of their discussion, provided that all such restrictions are content neutral. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
You grumble better than me.
Well done,
Dirty
well done.
mess of
Thank you,
Frank.
Bill. You did a great job as chair. So I hope that demonstrates some of the things. Of course, I do this script lines. People say, these are more points of order than I've ever had in 20 years of council meetings. But anyway, so that brings us to our last portion, which is going to be on principles of democratic governance. So it'll just be a little bit more, and then I'll set you free. So let us, again, look at our jargon. What do you say if you're a member and you're unhappy?
Point of order.
And if you're the chair, what do you respond?
Reach point.
And if you agree with what the member says?
Point is well taken.
And if you disagree?
Point is
Not
not.
well taken.
Good, good, got it down. All right, so principles of democratic governance. So, you know, my late husband, when he was in Tanzania, worked some with Jane Goodall when some of her students were kidnapped, and they had to try to release them. And of course, she did all that work on those adorable chimpanzees, and we look at them and we love them. And I want to tell you, that chimp is a predator.
Yep.
That chimpanzee is a predator. Under certain circumstances, chimpanzees can be vicious, and if we had a plane full of them going from San Francisco to New York, they would not survive. They would not survive. And this cute little human being is a predator. We humans are born predators, and we become civilized. We become civilized through the work of our colleagues who love us and our families. So why do we need these rules? Here's a quote from Richard Rohr. Win-lose is the only game most of us understand. We have a constant unspoken need for domination and actually find no enjoyment in win-win situations. So democracy is not merely a set of procedures. My argument is democracy is not merely a set of procedures. Here's a great quote from Michael Gerson. It has a moral structure. Democracy does not insist on perfect virtue from its leaders, but there is a set of values that lends authority to power: empathy, honesty, integrity, and self-restraint. So it seems so arbitrary. You know, the motion to execute King Charles I, they eventually cut off his head, was carried by a single vote. It was carried by a single vote. But this is our system. Majority rule is the key. The decision of the majority voting in a properly called meeting is the decision of the body as a whole. And the minority must make it their own. Robert's Rules emphasizes that the views of the minority must be protected, and they must have opportunity for free and full expression, even if their views are highly unpopular. So democracy is fragile, and it depends on mutual acceptance and understanding. It can only work if everyone agrees to follow its principles and process, and everyone must know and understand the rules because you are it. You are it. There is no parliamentary police. You, the council, have the authority over your own rules and procedures. And it's your attitude and your actions that determine how well you will serve your community. The U.S. Constitution comes at the top, then comes state law, then comes council rules of procedure, and then come Robert's Rules. It's at the bottom. Robert's Rules is at the bottom. So democratic decision-making requires vigorous contestation of ideas and interests, but also reasonable compromises born out of mutual trust, respect, and a common sense of citizenship. Now, some of you might say to me at this point, I don't trust my fellow council members. I don't respect them. My answer to you is act as if you did. Act as if you did. It's very, very important, because rogue actions tear apart the fabric of our council, of our democracy. If a member attacks another member or makes personal remarks or stalks out of the room in anger at losing, that is ripping apart democracy. Because in a democracy, how we decide things is more important than what we decide. That's the bottom line. How we decide things is more important than what we decide. So courtesy and respect, no surprises, no unilateral action, no end runs. These are essential for the system to work. My wish for you is that this council be united in its commitment to the process. You're not going to be united about your decisions, no. But if you can be united in your commitment to a free and fair process, then you will serve the citizens of Auburn. And so, the reason for that commitment is not because the law says so, or not because Robert's Rule says so, is because of the sacred trust that you hold from our ancestors and from the people of Auburn. So when we're passionate, this is hard to do. We zero in on the substance and sometimes neglect the process. Remember those kings, putting people in the tower who disagreed with them. We have relinquished violence, and we've relinquished the royal prerogative in favor of democracy. So I invite you to our last reflection question, again, just for yourself. Take your page, if you would, at the page, inside page. Reflecting on this workshop, I think that. So the reflection page at the front. Take a moment for yourself and for your exalted position and write down your thoughts.
Yep, I'll get there. Too many documents.
I know, it is too many, for sure. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Not your fault. There we go.
That's good.
So I will, at the end, take a few minutes for questions, and we will look at suspension of the rules. I just want to close by saying that on your dais, remember that dais, you are the authority. You deploy the power of our nation and our history for the people that you serve, and it's critical that you do so with full commitment to the democratic process. Remember the fundamental innocence of your fellow council members. remember the fundamental innocence of your fellow council members, and remember that each one of them took up the call to serve with the same integrity and the same high hopes that you did when you brought to it. I served 2 years in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and now when I send Christmas cards to our friends, they come back. No mail service available. They don't have mail, they don't have schools, they don't have roads, they don't have churches. It's a disaster. It's a total and horrible disaster. Local government is a miracle. What you're doing is a miracle. And I studied the Soviet Union, where everything was top down. It all came from Moscow. They didn't have local government either. It is such a privilege and such an honor for you to serve and for me to serve you. I want you to remember, if you will, that more than King John, Queen Elizabeth, King Charles, or King James, you serve on your community. You stand on the shoulders of giants. You are the successors to Washington, Madison, Franklin, Jefferson, Adams. That's the power that you have. And I know that you will employ it for the well-being of the community of Auburn. Yes.
I just have to say that in the age of cynicism and ridicule about government and democracy and
And
politics,
hold myself accountable for some of the things that I've done. And I also said that I hope that everyone else in this council does the same.
Indeed. Amen and hallelujah. I mean, that's the message. It only works if we all have that same understanding. But I do offer that phrase, which I think is a valid one. Remember the fundamental innocence of your colleagues and treat them as if you had that respect and loyalty and concern that you wish for, and it will come. It will come. You can restore what has been broken, and you can work together in the future, because I know all of you. I've worked with you in different circumstances, and I know what you bring to this, and your commitment and your passion, and the strength of your staff and the support of your community. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable. You are a remarkable community. So I want the best for all of you. So we did have a little technical question about suspending the rules. So I will tackle that. So the motion to suspend the rules in Robert is a motion where a member says, I move to suspend the rules in order to, and then you state what it is that you want to accomplish. You don't have to say which rule. You don't have to refer to that. You say, I move to suspend the rules in order to allow Councilmember Trout-Manuel to speak a third time, or to give 15 more minutes to Councilmember Wales. Whatever it is that you want to do. It needs a second, it cannot be debated, and it takes 2/3 to pass. So if all 7 of you are here, how many votes is it going to take to pass? It's going to take 5. It's going to take a high vote. And I always was a little nervous about it because another mayor told me that when they used to suspend the rules, their council tied themselves in horrible knots. But I don't see why that should happen. I think you ought to be able to do it. And as I mentioned, I'm doing these blog postings, so I will be publishing one on Suspend the Rules. I didn't include it in the book. The book doesn't have everything in it. You know, we tried to give the major things. I also have, there's in your packet, there's a 2-page guideline called Essential Guidelines for City Councils, and that's available for free. It's going to be available for free download. We also have one for citizen advisory committees and one for planning commissions. So if you feel that your citizens would like them, you can get them. I think they'll be up within a week. And we have PDFs that you can download about point of order and appeal and all these different things. And I'm available. I'm happy to be responsive to you for your concerns. Let's take the mayor since she hasn't had a question yet. No, thank you.
I was doing some looking at parliamentary procedure, and I noticed that in one place it said that either the council could suspend the rules to have someone speak more than twice, or the chair could simply allow it. Is that true?
Well, I think your rules give a fair amount of discretion to the chair. So again, I think the chair would do it. So the method I would recommend, actually, I didn't cover this. This is a great thing. Take your books and mark page 36. Mark page 36 and put a Post-it there and a highlighter. It's a method called unanimous consent. The chair suggests something, and if no one speaks up, then that is the will of the council. And the 2 phrases, and they're in that language tips cheat sheet, are without objection, or if there's no objection. So what I would say is the chair would say, if there's no objection, we'll suspend the rules and allow the member to speak a third time. And then the key part, there are 2 key parts. One is you have to pause. You know, you can't, it'd be like this. So this is the proposed amendment. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. You know, you can't do that. You have to pause and allow people a chance. And then the members have to know what to do. If you object, you just say objection. You just say objection, and you don't have to explain why. You're just explaining that it's, in other words, telling the chair that it's not unanimous. So then the chair will take a vote. Then the chair will move to taking a vote. But it's a very good way for the chair to exercise leadership while still acknowledging that the council is the final authority. So unanimous consent would be the way you'd handle it. And the chair could say, if there's no objection, we'll suspend the rules for 10 minutes or for another third speech, or to have this person speak. And then if you do object, just say objection, and then the chair will take a vote on it. And also, if anybody calls the question, that's useful. You know, because technically, if I say call the question, is there a second, we'll vote on whether to vote. You can just say, is there any objection to stopping debate and voting now? So it's very handy. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, wait a minute, you had one, Yolanda.
No, I was just going to ask our attorney. I didn't see that here, so could we add that in our
About unanimous consent?
yes.
So you do refer to Robert's rules. You do have it. You do say that you're based on Robert's rules, so you already have it. If you
Well, here's the challenges to rules.
right, but
Does any
right at the
members-
beginning, doesn't it say that Robert's rules new latest edition shall govern? Yeah.
Unless
Unless
attempts
otherwise,
or
yeah,
otherwise.
unless superseded by these rules. I think it. I don't remember where it is, but I believe you can have it. You can see what the advantage to putting stuff into your rules is that you get it all in one place. I mean, it's easier than having to go back and read through the 800 pages to find. But if you, since you have a body, as a body, have said we're going to be governed by Robert's Rules, newly revised, latest edition, unless superseded by these procedures, then all that's there in Robert is available to you. And it doesn't need any further action. It's allowable. That's your, what's called your parliamentary authority. That's your parliamentary authority. So let's see, who else had questions? You had a question.
So when you move to suspend the rules, do you say for 10 minutes or 5 more questions? How do you bring it to an end? So
Whatever
that-
you want, whatever your proposal is.
Okay, and then does the chair then declare that we're back into regular rules? Okay, so there is a point when it's,
Yeah.
and the chair acknowledges
The chair,
when
yeah.
it's over.
And
Okay.
that's part of what I said for the deputy mayor and the mayor, you know, the exhausting nature of all this. I mean, you have to, and it's really good to use your assistant or your deputy or somebody to help you out with the technical stuff, because when you're running a meeting, you have 3 different tasks. One is you have to manage the procedure. One is you have to manage the substance, the actual decisions and motions that you're making. And one is that you have to manage the emotions. You have to keep connected to people and know where they are emotionally. And it's really tiring. It takes a lot of mental brain power. I gave this training a year ago, and somebody said to me when I saw her last month, she said, "And you didn't tell me how much effort this is going to be. I feel like I've had a whole workout after every council meeting." So it does take a lot of effort to be alert in that way. But that's the chair's duty. Yes. Yes.
So in this unanimous consent, and you hear this in Congress all the time, where the president of Congress, and somebody's doing this process, uses the term without objection, and there's no other comment made. So is that what would happen here if there's nobody making any comment at all related to whatever that motion is?
Then it passes.
So it's
And
automatically passed.
It passes. And you know, according to Robert, things like adopting the agenda can be done by unanimous consent. It's a vote. It's an actual vote of all the 7 members by their silence. But we don't recommend using it for substantive matters. I worked with this one city, and they told me that last May, 1st of May, they had a council manager system, and their mayor said on the 1st of May, well, you know, it's the 1st of May, we really ought to beautify the city. I think that we should put flower pots all along Main Street, and we should move those trees that are blocking the view on City Hall. You all right with that? Okay, we'll do it. I mean, no allocation, no legislation, no motions, no nothing. The poor staff was just in a kind of state of utter shock. They called it the May Day motions, the May Day motions that he made. So unanimous consent, you can't use it for that, but for minor procedural matters, it's very handy. And thank you for bringing that up. What other questions? We've covered the waterfront. I've exhausted you. Thank you all so much for this opportunity.
Thank you again. Okay, we will return to the agenda.
And you want these back.
The orange ones you can keep, the scripts you can keep, all I need is the tints. All I need is the name
The
tints.
scripts you don't need?
Nope.
No?
Tense.
Keep them to practice. Practice on your children. Make them be the burnt out member.
There you go. Here's one. Thank you.
Finance and economic development, anything?
Well, kind
Really
of
exciting?
disappointing. I don't, oh, pardon.
Can we
sorry.
have a 5-minute break?
Sure, if everybody concurs.
You just interrupted.
Without
Isn't that a
objection.
point of order?
Without objection.
Well,
Yeah,
I was trying to catch.
Point of privilege.
So what are we gonna do?
No objection, with no objection.
So you say we're in
10
recess for 5 minutes.
Say-
With no objection, we're in recess for 5 minutes. What she said.
With no objection, we are in recess for 5 minutes.
That's the chair being like Dave Niehaus, you know, you have to keep repeating things. You have to say stuff. You have
My,
to-
oh, my, oh, my.
My, oh, my.
Get out the rye
Get out
bread.
the rye bread salami. You going over with people what they want to see in their contracts?
Smoke signals wouldn't have worked at that stage of the game, huh?
Larry, I had half of that same sandwich.
Did ya?
It was good.
It was good.
Yeah, it was moist. I liked it.
Yeah.
It wasn't dry or.
A little bit of onion in there, which,
Well, I didn't put any onion.
oh, I didn't, I left my onion on the plate, but I think there was already some in there, 'cause
Oh, was there?
yeah, I think so.
It's a challenge, but it's part of the learning process, like she said, you have to kind of repeat.
So, a fleeing, suspect from the Renton Police Department crashed into the gate at Boeing, injured a Boeing employee.
Procedure and everything.
And also a city employee as well. Just this afternoon, apparently.
What about
Yeah.
that? What about that container ship?
Oh, they're in
Turkey.
Turkey, yeah.
I've been there. I've been in that area.
Have you? We got a friend of mine who's a master, and he's taken ships to Pakistan, where they are going to scrap ships out, and you just drive them right up on the beach. Yeah, and I asked him, I said, what does that feel like? He says, it just feels like you're slowing down. He says, it's not a, you know.
And
purpose of that? Well, it's when they're scrapping a ship out.
Yeah?
And it's a place, I think Lahore, but it's in Pakistan. And they just scrap the ships. They also do it in India that way.
It is, and then so they scrap it at that point?
Right, they just start tearing the ship apart. It's not a very clean way to do it.
No, it's not an environmental.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, interesting.
Other sessions with Ian, this is by far the best one we've had. It's more intimate.
Good. Did you worked in your yard today?
No, we went to Maryland.
Good.
I actually wrote that note. We both said, I just term more civility.
I worked in the yard.
Because it gives you more
3 hours, got a ton done.
certain number Roberts gives you that.
I have got.
I think after tonight, we have that opportunity to go a little deeper into the understanding of each other and how things work.
Last minute because he changes the agenda.
It's a lot.
Yes.
You did a nice job there. You make a good chair.
No, of course not. But
Well, especially when you're in front of everybody else, you know?
I never hated it. This is better when I was in school.
Yeah.
To get up in front of people and read. Okay.
Get psychological,
Better,
yeah.
better.
One thing I forgot, Mr. Mayor, is this is a copy of the handout just without the note-taking portions, if you would like for reference. Sure. I'll pass it on when you're playing Zoom.
He's just gone to the restroom.
As Wayne and I used to say, gentlemen of a certain age.
Oh, there you go, out of order.
Point of order.
Point of order. Point of order.
what's your point? My point, I have to agree.
Oh.
Point of order, I resemble that remark.
And should we take a vote? Yeah.
Phone number my doctor is.
Or using that commercial, that bladder commercial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Growing older ain't for sissies.
That's for sure.
Well, you've got him tonight, don't you? Sissy.
Oh, we're not in session.
I know, but.
You have a doctor's visit on Friday. Your doctor's telling you he's taking the same medication you are.
Oh.
Gentleman of a certain age. You got the right doctor.
Thank you. I'm going to carry that in my purse.
You might not have seen the Jim Few. It's in hospice.
We kind of knew that was coming.
Doesn't make it any easier to hear him, though.
No, it doesn't. Is it here or is it
I
there?
would imagine he's in Arizona. Joe Bauman told Dana. He was up here last summer.
Mhm.
You know, I took this class
Yeah,
from you.
I know when he comes back because he attends Rotary.
Sound City Association with new members and new chairs and stuff.
Makes good use of his dollar.
So this was for
Talk.
you.
It is new.
Okay. And I go, wow, that's pretty nice.
And I'm very
You gotta
pleased.
pay
Remember
more than
you
a
and I
buck.
took it with her?
Yeah,
That was a pretty good class.
Thank you. No, I'm very pleased with that cheat sheet.
So you must have been having a lot of cities calling you for you to put something like this together, because you didn't have it before.
No, that's right. I tried to keep the work evolving, you know, And the method, the little scripts, you know, the having that script where everybody has a role, that's a new thing too. But I think it's helpful because you don't have to improvise. You can just see the way that some of them play out.
Well, we had that, didn't we? Didn't we have that? We were mayor, we were council members, and,
No, that we've done, but
Oh,
the thing, like the salmon colored paper where you see everybody's
Oh,
lines.
okay, yeah,
Because the
that's true. We
thing
didn't
about
have that,
the, you know,
yeah.
where this method, where you have just
Yeah.
one remark, you don't get the whole picture. I mean, I think it's valuable because that's what real life meetings are like, you know, somebody says something and just something that's out of the blue. But I like the salmon colored one as well because that lets you see the whole
Progression.
sequence, how it all plays out. May I ask, is it contrary to your custom to resume even though a member is temporarily absent? Because from a parliamentary point of view,
We can resume, we have a quorum.
it's up to you, but
We'll give him one more minute.
Chief Lee wants to go.
That's your happy dance, Bob?
Chair, basically, all sounds.
Is he coming? We will now reconvene the meeting, and believe the next item on the agenda is the finance and economic development discussion items.
Well, this will go quite quickly. I don't have any dates for this, for the topics that are on our matrix, with perhaps, since I see Jeff Tate in the audience, perhaps you could tell me when we could expect the Livable Cities update?
The update that we could provide, maybe you could schedule for any date that we're ready at any time.
June 11th? Okay. And with that, I yield.
Okay. Are there any other discussion items? I don't believe so. Councilmember Wales.
Dan, can you give us an idea on annexations, a date for some information on annexations?
We've had a couple of meetings on that, and I think that we'll have, we're going to have some more, but let me promise you that we'll get together and put something together in terms of the reporting. And unless, Mayor, did you have any timetable suggestions?
No, I think that's one of the things, we've had initial discussion, but we will go ahead and have at least one more discussion, and then we'll identify with the deputy mayor and also with the special focus area chair on the appropriate date for that to be placed on.
Councilmember Wales.
I think that we've seen a lot of legal, and we've talked about that, but I think it would be nice if we just had as a discussion item among the 7 of us to see philosophically where we are with this, and then if there seems to be some consensus, then we could give more direction to Dan.
Can I throw this out to you? One of the things that we're planning on bringing you would be some factual information that would be necessary or helpful for you to evaluate.
So can we have a date?
If Shelley were here, I would.
Maybe in 3 or 4 months or something?
Oh, no, sooner than that.
So, once we have our next meeting, we can identify
Okay.
the appropriate time to bring it back for the annexation, either special focus
Councilmember
areas.
Troutman.
Dan, could we have somebody either from the police department or the prosecutor department to talk about the firearm program? Give us an update on that?
Firearm program?
The surrender?
Oh, sure, we can do that. Maybe,
Maybe we can coordinate on that, because there are parts that are police and parts that are court-related.
Right, because we've been hearing a lot about it at the Regional Law and Justice Committee, so it would be nice to have some update on that. And could you give me a date on that, because we don't have a date? When you meet with the mayor, can you guys discuss that?
Yeah, so any items that come up as requests for future agenda topics will be put on as a request, and then between myself, the deputy mayor, and the special focus area chair will identify when it's appropriate for it to be on the agenda, based on the time of work, the amount of work that it takes to get something prepared, and the prioritization of work within that department.
It's already on my worksheet here. I'm just looking for a date so we can give it to the deputy mayor. It's on number 8.
Yeah, at the bottom.
That's
model
what I'm saying.
firearms.
We will identify
Okay.
a date.
Thank you.
Okay. Any others? Okay, new business. I don't believe we have any new business. Matrix, I guess we've pretty much gone through the matrix. I think, yeah, we've discussed all the items on there, and I think any of the potential new items coming up. So, unless there are any other issues before the council, Councilmember Wales.
I'm not going to be here on the 23rd of this month, and I'm one of the people that requested sign requirements, and I wondered if we could come up with a different date for Assistant Director Tate to present it. Anything other than April 23rd. Maybe the study session after that. Or wait until it comes around again.
So I guess,
Is there any objection to that from the other council members?
I guess my only question would be, Jeff, if we delayed it until June 25th, is there any big push to get this on the agenda to discuss it?
not from that perspective.
And I think we just move it to the June 25th date.
Very good.
One more. Yes. In light of what Ann presented us tonight, and many references back to our council rules of procedure, I think just set a general item for our study session is to have a review of our council rules of procedure with all 7 of us together.
That'd be an excellent idea.
So that's typically what you have the 5th Mondays of any month for, and I believe you have a 5th Monday on April 30th. So that could be, typically we cancel that meeting unless there is a topic of that nature, so.
You almost had me say
Almost,
so.
did I? Yeah.
Councilmember Troutman.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted us to go back and review on something that I should have, now I learned that I probably should have said, point of order, on electing deputy mayors. I went back to review our handbook, and I went back to review how many days and months. We worked on this new document. So I would like us to bring it to the table for discussion.
Member Wales?
Yeah, I think if we can go through it page by page, but maybe not in the weeds, because we could spend hours on each page, but kind of maybe go through it all and get a feel, and then individually mark questions and then come back, because I marked questions with Ann's, and then later on they were answered, so I didn't need to ask them. They get the gestalt and then go back and try to take what we've learned from Ann and maybe bring the two documents together, and then deal with some of the other questions that are out there.
And we may have to create additional ad hoc committees to deal with some of the issues if they feel that those are important. Yes, Ann?
So I'd be happy on a complimentary basis to just review the rules of procedure and send you a little memo of anything that strikes me. There's not much. It was pretty good.
That would be
I
great.
don't think it should be complimentary.
It's a bonus.
I don't think it should be complimentary.
You have a copy of our rules and regulations, or rules and procedures? Good.
They're not, I have it, thank you. There's not a lot. I just noticed a few little points where I thought you might want to consider. So I'd be happy to do that as part of my services.
Any other questions or concerns regarding the matrix or upcoming meetings? Councilmember Wells.
Maybe we could hire her and have her come back for that study session when we do it on the 5th week. And, I mean, it's a leveling between her and Dan. It's kind of a nice, what is other places doing, and it's kind of a leveling agent.
It's our finance director here. What do you think, Mayor?
Well, so we can talk with Ann. She's going to be gone, I believe, for a while.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have another engagement on the 30th of April,
We
so
can go with you. Where are you going? Someplace?
it's not going to be as good as this.
Oh, okay.
Yolanda, did you have any other questions?
No, I just wanted to second on that it would be nice to have her, since she's going to review it, if she could come and be with us when we go through it. And if we are asking the appropriate questions or not.
Okay. Well, I think we've got the matrix all finished. If there's no objections or any other thing before the council.
She has something.
Yes, we have some additional handouts that Ann has for us that are unmarked up.
So this is just the same presentation, but in a reference format, not the note-taking
thank you,
format.
Ann.
So if you'd like
Great.
to have it for a more compact form.
Gotcha. Thanks again, Ann.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I will call that the meeting is adjourned.